Então, com base nisso, a gente sabe que existem, né, 286
Know
estações de
that we
monitoramento
have
e cerca de
286 monitoring, and the states considering this, around 11 states considering the federal district, is what we're going to have monitoring. So what we see is this assessment, both spatial and temporal, of the distribution from the stations. And here we see through time the distribution of this, and these are available in this southeast region. Here we have around 84% of the 5.5 in the northeast, only 3 in the central west, and on the northern area, considering the exclusive data of it. Based on this, we can say the following. This network is not a network that is representative when we talk about a scenario that is national. So here we have a direct impact on the understanding and this assessment, both on the availability and the concentrations of the contaminators on the scale, and here to assess the concentrations in different states where we don't have monitoring. So here, earlier I mentioned this in general, but we know that not every station is going to monitor every pollutant. So when we assess all of them, it's possible to check that some are less monitored, like in the particulate that is a contaminator that I mentioned before and is not monitored. So here we have an assessment up to 2022, and we see that the concentration is low when we monitor the particulate. Mostly those concentrated in Southeast, as mentioned before, in a scenario of every stations that were assessed. This is a problem, how we're going to assess and talk about health and control if we don't have a monitoring as the thin PMs. It's important to mention as well that the thin PM was within CONAMA in 2018. So this has an impact when we talk about the availability of these stations nationally. This slide shows the cities with more than 1 million inhabitants. In red, we have people more than 1 million that don't have a monitoring station, and this information is from the Ministry of Environment, and this was done in 2019, so maybe we have some changes from there. From a general observation, we can say that in cities with more than 1 million inhabitants, that would be 17 cities, only 7 have the monitoring of the quality of the air, which is a problem, because if we say that the quality of the air has a direct impact on health, we expect that when we have more people are going to be the more affected areas with concentrations of contaminants. And we have the space, but when we check on the temporal availability, we have problems as well. These are the stations for the city of Sao Paulo, and here we see the amount of data that we have monthly. All the stations, even there within the material, when we want to do an assessment long term, it's not as interesting because the assessment is very scarce. So how can we solve this problem, or at least reduce the uncertainties related to this low distribution. One of our responses, the answers within Climapolis assessment, is doing this aligning between the reference monitors, sensors for low and sensoring data, remote sensoring. So with this, we're able to reduce some in the general scenario. These are the low costs. These are sensor. In red, we have distribution of the sensor, low cost sensors, and in red, the reference. This scenario presents the northern area where we have a monitoring in large part with sensors, and southeast would be with this reference sensors. It's important to mention that it's difficult to say that the quality of this, because the stations in general here in this X are the relation between the low cost and this reference. So here is more than 1,000 kilometers, because here what we have in southeast where we have the monitors, reference monitors, it's a huge distance to be able to put this data to check the quality. What we know here is to assess this, we have to assess the quality of the sensors, because the popper within the device are they going to have two monitors. So the idea is for two sensors to have concentrations that are close. So when we do this and we have the days from the installation of the sensor, and the Y is the difference between sensor A and B. Here we see that as soon as we start the time of this installment, this begins to raise, because they're not calibrated, and sometimes you have a problem, a loss of quality. As I mentioned, we have and the sensor, remote sensor. In this context, it's important to mention that there is in the national level, we have global products that we end up having because of the lack of information. And we have two versions of the University of Washington to generate these products. They work with simulations and data in general and depth. And here we can generate these estimations on particulates monthly. And here, on the next slides, we have a regression. And the version 6 would be based on the CNN. We can have a comparison within this data and monitored by sensors reference, and this data monitored by remote sensoring. So in general, we see that the version 5 with the data generated by the version has a correlation that is more adequate. And here we can see several with the concentrations. We see that in general, we have low concentrations that are observed by reference are related by these data of satellites, and the high concentrations are subestimated. In the case of version 6, which would be the CNN, we see that all concentrations are subestimated. So to end here, we have the distribution, space distribution of these correlations, and we see that in general, we have two formations with data for this satellite. Here on the bias variation, we can see that bias in general are positive. What is that mean? I mentioned already that we have that is superestimated. The bias is a device that shows that we have low concentrations in this region. So in a positive scenario, thinking about the next steps for monitoring of the quality of the air, the idea would be to expand the network on monitoring, and with the national policy for the quality of the air, maybe we will have an improvement once the states, through 2 years, we need to generate these plans, and we hope that we have some monitoring stations in a state where we don't have any monitoring. Also, with this sensor, it's interesting to create a standardization and a way of calibrating this for this data to be useful. Lastly, something that is important is to generate product that is remote sensoring in nationally. So, because to treat health, it's important to have this data and to be able to assess properly. So based on this, I end my presentation. Thank you.
Obrigada, Anderson.
Thank you.
Seguindo adiante, nós vamos apresentar a
Following,
professora
we're going to
Tassiana.
present Professor Tassiana.
Meteorologia, possui mestrado em doutorado em
She
ciência
is
atmosférica pela
meteorologist
com foco em poluição atmosférica,
focused
professora adjunta
in
da
contamination. She's
Federal de Minas
professor
Gerais,
of the
faz
Federal
mestrado em
University of Minas
Ciência
Gerais,
Ambiental e é membro
and
permanente do
she's
grupo
a permanent
pós-graduação
member
da
of Postgrad
Federal de Minas Gerais
of
e Espírito
Federal
Santo. Sua pesquisa
University
concentra-se
Espírito
em
Santo.
qualidade do ar, controle da
Her
poluição,
research
monitoramento
talks of
atmosférico e
about
modelagem para avaliação de ambientes e
modeling
ambientes urbanos.
for assessment in environments.
Oi, gente. Deixa eu aumentar aqui. Bom dia a todos, é um
Morning.
prazer estar aqui, reencontrar, né, grandes
I'm
amigos.
glad to be here.
Vim aqui com a incumbência, né, a Judith pediu para mostrar o que a gente vem fazendo
We are here
nessa
to show what
subrede,
we've been
que é
doing with the
voltada à qualidade do
substation,
ar.
working with the
Primeiramente,
quality of the
queria
air.
agradecer aqui
First, I
todos
would
os
like to
membros que vêm
thank all the
ativamente
members that
trabalhando nessa
been
subrede,
working with this
colaborando com
subnetwork,
as pesquisas, né? O
collaborating
Anderson,
with
que acabou
the
de apresentar,
researchers.
oficialmente é o
Anderson
pós-doc dessa subrede e está terminando agora o seu período. Eita, nem marquei.
Anderson
Seu
is
período
the
com a entrega de um paper, né? Anderson já está
and
esperando aí para esse
he's
tratamento dos
delivering a
dados.
paper with the treatment
Então,
of
queria
data.
agradecer a todos
Would
e
like to thank
convidar as
everyone
pessoas que
and
oficialmente, na
invite.
verdade, esqueci de
Oh,
colocar a
I
Rita.
forgot to
Desculpa,
add Rita. Sorry, Rita.
Não, na verdade, todo mundo que quiser, né,
Everyone
colaborar
that
nessa
want to
rede,
collaborate in this network,
Adriana também,
Adriana,
tem várias sub-redes que se
because we have
interligam, né?
subnetworks that
O
are
próprio
related.
Tiago, enfim,
Tiago,
são várias pessoas que estão aí se
and several people
interconectando
that
nessa
are
sub-rede.
relating
Hoje eu
within
venho
the
trazer
subnetworks.
alguns
Here,
dados
I
sobre
bring some
monitoramento
data
que,
on
na verdade,
monitoring,
corroborando com o que o Anderson já mostrou,
checking
eu
with
vou
what
passar
Anderson
brevemente
already
sobre essa questão
showed.
do
I'm going to
monitoramento.
briefly go
A
through
modelagem
this.
que é, assim,
The
a
modeling
continuidade
that
do
is the
monitoramento,
continuity
conforme
of
o
the
Anderson mencionou,
monitoring,
a
as
falta de
Anderson
dados e a falta
mentioned, with
de
the lack of
resolução
data
espacial que a gente tem das estações,
and the
uma
space that
alternativa
we
além
have in the
dos que ele já
substations,
mostrou,
an
das que ele
alternative
mostrou, a
beyond
gente
what
tem aí a
he showed.
modelagem
We have
da
the
qualidade do ar.
modeling
E
of the
o que a
quality of
gente
the
vem
air.
fazendo, né, as etapas
And
que
what we've
estamos
been
aí executando
doing
e futuros trabalhos futuros que a gente
is what
está
we've
na
been
expectativa de
developing
iniciar para o ano
and
que vem.
some works
Então,
that we are going to begin
essas
next year.
imagens aqui eu estou
These
trazendo para mostrar para
images, I'm
vocês
bringing
de uma
them
forma
to
diferente do
show
que o
you
Anderson já
in a
trouxe,
different
como é
way
que é a
that
qualidade do
what
ar no
Anderson
Brasil aqui.
showed,
Essas
how
imagens a
is
gente
quality
consegue
of the
pegar
air in
do
Brazil.
IEMA.
And we
Um
have to
problema
show
assim
this,
bem
and Emma,
crítico que eu acho é para a gente estudar a
we
qualidade do ar, a
have
gente tem que ter várias pernas,
to
a gente
show
tem que ir em
this, we
várias
have
plataformas,
response,
vários sites, porque eles não estão
we have
conectados.
several
Então,
sites
se a gente
because they're
entra na
not
plataforma do
connected.
IEMA, que está
We
aqui o
have the
site
platform of
estratégias do
EMA, which is the site for the
ar.org.br, a
control
gente vai olhar,
of the
por exemplo,
quality
que
of
está
the air.
vendo
We're going
10
to see here, for
distribuição
example,
de estações,
the distribution,
até
this
um número
stations
maior do que
distribution, and
a
a
Rio
larger
Brasileiro
number
e Ozônio.
for what we
Então, são
have.
poucas estações,
So
conforme o Anderson
these
falou.
are very few stations,
E
as we
conforme
said.
ele mencionou também, a
And
gente
as he
tem outras
mentioned, we
plataformas, como
also
o
have some
monitorado do próprio
platforms
Ministério do Meio
that are
Ambiente,
monitored
que trazem outras
and
estações que não estão
bring
aqui.
some other stations
Então,
that are not
trabalhar
here.
com esses dados vem
So
sendo
working
realmente
with
aí
this
um
data have
challenge para a gente,
been
né?
a challenge for us.
E aí, para nossa
And
grande surpresa,
for
né,
our
tá
surprise,
olhando aí para o computador, né? Tô aqui chamando a atenção, igual a Pérola, tô fazendo. A gente no
we
Climápolis, no
on
evento que teve em
Climapolis, on the event that we
2022,
had
eu
in
acho, lá em Natal, né?
2022 in Natal,
Tiveram algumas pessoas do
we
Ministério do Meio
had some
Ambiente e aí acabou
people
conversando com o Leonardo e
and we ended
convidando
up
ele para
talking with
liderar
Leonardo, inviting
projeto
him
dentro
to
do Ministério.
share a
E o
project
Leonardo
within the
convidou
ministry,
várias
and
pessoas
Leonardo
da nossa
invited a
subrede
lot
para
of people
trabalhar
from
nesse
our
projeto.
subnetwork to
Então, a
work in
gente
this
acabou de
project.
entregar, né,
So we
com a
ended up
coordenação do professor
delivering
Leonardo,
with the
esse
coordination of
relatório
Professor
anual de
Leonardo this
acompanhamento da
report
qualidade do ar, que, na
on
verdade, ele é um relatório
a
dos dados
follow-up of
disponíveis, ou
the
seja,
quality of the air. These are
das
the data
redes,
that are
né,
available
do
of
que a
the
gente tem no
networks,
Brasil. Então,
of
não
what
foi um
we have
relatório
in Brazil.
para
It's not
avaliar a
a
qualidade do ar
report
do
to
Brasil, mas sim
assess the quality of
para
the
ver
air
como é
in
que está
Brazil,
sendo esse
is
monitoramento.
to
Então, ele
show
acabou de
how
ser
this monitoring
entregue,
is happening.
e
It
a gente tem
just
aqui, de
was
uma forma
delivered, and we
semelhante ao que o
have
Anderson
to a
tratou,
similar
né?
way
O
of
Anderson ele
what
teve
Anderson was
que garimpar
presenting.
esses dados sem a
We
ajuda
had
do Ministério,
to
diferente
get
dessa
this
equipe
data
do
without the
projeto
help
aqui
of
do
the
Ministério do Meio Ambiente.
ministry
Então, aqui a
with
gente
the
vê
Ministry
à
of
sua
Environment.
esquerda,
Here
são
on the
em azul,
left,
verde,
in
sei lá o que
blue,
que é isso.
we have
A gente vê as estações ativas,
the
isso
active
considerando sensores de
stations
baixo
and
custo que
considering the
para o
sensors,
Ministério do
local
Meio Ambiente,
sensors
oficialmente isso vai
for
ser
the
chamada
Ministry of
como
Environment
estações
are going
indicativas.
to be called
E
as
também a
indicative
gente vê, também
stations, and
dessa mesma
also we
cor,
see
as estações de
in the
referência.
same
Então, é
color the
uma
reference
junção de como
stations.
é
This is
monitorado
a gathering
como é que
of
a
how
qualidade do ar
is
é monitorada no
monitored
Brasil.
and how
As
this is
cores em
monitored in
vermelho
Brazil. The
mostram
red
as
colors
que foram
show
desativadas, né? As
that
estações
were
inativas. E aí a
are
gente vê
inactive.
aqui embaixo
And
no
here
gráfico,
we
a
see
gente
in
vê
the
os
graph
estados e,
below, we
claro, né, a
see the
região
states
sudeste aqui
and the southeast
colaborando com um
area
maior número de
helping
monitoramento,
with
de estações de
a
monitoramento.
larger
É triste ver a realidade do
monitoring.
Nordeste, né,
It's sad
principalmente
to
porque eu
see the
sou
northeast
nordestina, então isso
area because
me
I'm
irrita
from there,
bastante.
so this
E a
is
região
annoying.
central do Brasil
And the
também,
center
que
of the
apesar da gente
Brazils
ser a
are
capital do país, mas
because we
monitoramento
have the
passou longe
capital
também.
of
À
the
direita, a
country,
gente
but
viu
we don't
aqui
have monitoring.
as estações, a diferença entre estações de
On the
baixo custo, no
on the
caso as
right, we
indicativas, os
see here
sensores de
the
baixo custo,
indications of the
e
sensors, low
em
cost,
azul as
and in
estações
blue
que são de
we have
referência. E aí a gente
those
observa, se eu
that are
comparar com
referenced.
o gráfico anterior, a imagem do IEMA, a gente vê
And if
estações
I
aqui no
compare
Maranhão,
with the
estações no
former,
Pará que
with
não
the other
existem
map,
naquela
there are
plataforma,
some
né? Então, a
substations here
plataforma
in Pará and
monitorar, que é
some
do
other
Ministério do Meio
places that
Ambiente, não
they're
converge com a do
not
IEMA, que
monitored,
não
and it
converge com
doesn't
tantas
talk
outras.
to the
Então,
IEMA and
eu acho que
many
tem
others.
que, né, a gente,
So
como
I believe
sociedade
that
na
for us as
acadêmica, a gente precisa
society
fazer um
here
esforço
on
para
the
que isso
academia, we need to make an
melhore.
effort
E
for
aí,
this to improve.
o pessoal de Natal, né, começou, a professora
And
Judite, o professor Jean,
the people
começaram
from Natal began,
só um detalhe que eu esqueci de mencionar,
just a
aqui,
detail
infelizmente, em
I
Natal,
forgot to mention
oficialmente, ela
here,
não há
unfortunately,
monitoramento,
officially,
né?
we don't have
Então,
monitoring.
nesse sentido,
So
o
in this
Climápolis vem
sense,
para tentar preencher essa
Climapolis
lacuna
come
em termos de
to
monitoramento aqui em
fulfill
Natal
this
e no
gap
Nordeste em si.
in
E
terms of
aí, o pessoal
monitoring,
começou a utilizar, né,
and
voltou,
we
né, porque já
began
existiam esses
to,
sensores, estavam
because
ali
we had the
precisando de uma certa
sensors, they were
manutenção.
there all
Então, o
this time.
professor Jean, junto com a professora
So Professor
Judite,
Jean, together
vou ver
with
essa fotinha
Judith,
aqui do Jean,
we're going to see this
eles
picture here,
montaram
Jean.
esses
They
sensores, claro, tudo
gathered
isso, gente, eu
a
mostrei na equipe
sensor,
lá
and
dos
all of this I
professores, né, e
showed
pós-doc, mas
in
por
the
trás dos
in
professores
postdoc,
existe
but
uma imensa
beyond,
equipe
beside the
dos
professors,
nossos
we
alunos,
have
dos nossos grupos de
another
pesquisas que não
team. We
são
have
bolsistas
our
do Climápolis, mas estão aí
groups.
colaborando.
It's not, they're not
Todos os
from
professores
Climapolis
são seus
specifically,
alunos e
but
por
all the
trás aí
professors are
colaborando, tá?
working and
Então a gente vê aqui que
collaborating.
as concentrações, isso aqui é
So
monitoramento de
here we see
PM2,5
that the
e acima
concentrations here
PM10. Isso foi
and
uma semana em
PM10,
setembro aqui
if
deste
it's
ano.
a
Então a gente
week
vê
in
que
September this year. So we
concentrações super
see here the
baixas, né?
concentrations
Independente
are
se o
very low,
sensor está monitorando certo ou
independently of the
não,
sensors
isso não é o
monitoring
caso,
right or not.
mas a
This
gente
is
vê
not the case.
como é um
But we
sensor indicativo,
see,
a gente vê que as
because it's an
concentrações
indicative, we
indicam
see that
que
the
são muito
concentrations
baixas,
show
né? E
they're
se a
very
gente
low.
comparar aqui,
And if we
chamando a atenção, esse
compare
paper acabou de ser lançado, lancei hoje,
this paper
coloquei aqui
was
essa foto, é
launched,
bem,
and I
bem
saw
interessante, o
this
pessoal de
picture
Campinas,
is very
o
interesting.
Ronan, não
People
sei
from
se vocês
Campinas,
conhece.
Ronan. I don't know
Eu não
if you
conhecia.
are aware of this.
Na
I
verdade,
didn't.
ele fez né, chamando atenção
We
para a
did.
atualização
We've
da
been calling
da
attention to
16, né, que foi
the
atualizado mais recente, A gente vê que, comparando para Natal, as concentrações,
Comparing
né,
to Natal, the
são bem
presentations
inferiores
are very low compared
aí que coincide com a OMS.
to what we have
Então,
with
a gente teria que
WHO.
também
So we
pensar,
would
né,
need to think
talvez se for para Natal,
maybe
utilizar sensores de
if
baixo
it's to
custo, a gente teria
Natal
que
to
também pensar nesse
use
sentido.
low-cost
Quais
sensor,
sensores de
we have
baixo
to think
custo
in this
seriam mais
sense.
apropriados para
Which
regiões com
ones
baixas ou
are
baixíssimas
the
concentrações,
appropriate for
né? Então,
very
acho que
low
isso,
concentrations?
esse início de
So this
monitoramento por vocês em
beginning
Natal traz também esse
of the
esse
monitoring
warning
also
aí
bring this warning
para os próximos passos, tá?
for the next steps.
Bom, com relação à modelagem, então, antes eu
With
perguntei
the
bastante
modeling, we treated,
sobre a questão do
we
monitoramento.
talked a lot
Então,
about
com
the
relação à modelagem,
monitoring.
a gente
So
tem toda uma metodologia
based
que é
on
bem
the
conhecida pela
modeling, we
comunidade
have
aqui
the
que trabalha
methodology that is
com
very
isso.
well known
Não é
for the
nenhuma
community
novidade.
that works
Então,
with this.
a
So
gente já
it's
está fazendo
nothing new.
a
But we've
modelagem
been doing the
para o Brasil
modeling
inteiro, tá? Eu vou
for the
mostrar a
whole
grade no próximo
country.
slide, mas
I'm
querendo só
going to
mostrar para
show
vocês quais são os
the
modelos que
grid,
estamos usando.
but I'm going to
A gente
show
está
you
usando o
which other
WRF,
templates we're using.
modelo,
We're using
né, que atualmente,
BRF,
né, conhecido, e
that
agora
is
daqui a pouco a
very
gente vai
well
ter que
known,
migrar, né?
and we're going
Acabei de
to
voltar
migrate
dos
very
Estados
soon.
Unidos e está todo mundo
I
indo
just come
pro
from
próximo
the
já.
United
Então a
States,
gente vai
but
ter que
and
fazer esse
everyone is
esforço
working
aí nos
from the
próximos
next
anos.
with the next one. We're going to
Então a gente tem um modelo
we'll need
meteorológico
to have
que para
this
conversar
effort,
com o modelo de qualidade
and
do
we
ar, a
have
gente
the
precisa
material
passar
to
por
talk with the
pré-processador, no caso,
modeling of the
se a gente
quality of
fosse
the air.
usar o
We
modelo
have to go
CEMAC,
through a
né?
processing
Muitas
if we
pessoas aqui
use a CEMAC.
utilizam o modelo online, que é
Many people
Wolf,
use the online, that is
Wolfcam. Então,
WorkCam.
no nosso caso aqui, a gente optou
In
por
our
usar o
case,
modelo
we
offline, onde a
are
gente consegue
using
tratar
the
a meteorologia
offline
separado da química.
that we can take care
E
of
aí a gente está
methodology
usando
separated
as
from
emissões,
chemistry, and we're using
principalmente
the
dos bancos de
emissions
dados globais,
mostly
como
on a
queimadas do
global
zinco, o mercúrio,
database.
as emissões biogenímicas. E aí a gente está utilizando,
And we've
inserindo os
been
bancos de dados
using and
locais, por
adding
exemplo,
the
cidades que já
database that are
possuem os
local,
seus
cities that
inventários, como
have their
Vitória,
inventories,
São Paulo, Rio de
Vitória,
Janeiro,
São
BH.
Paulo,
A gente
Rio de
está
Janeiro,
inserindo esses dados
Belo
locais junto com os
Horizonte.
bancos de dados
We are
globais
inserting this
para poder
together
fazer
with a
grande
global
banco de dados
database
de emissão.
to have
E
a
aí a gente
huge
processar
database for
através do
emissions
Smoke,
and
que é um
process through Smoke,
pré-processador, na
which is a
verdade é um
preprocessor.
pós-processador dessas
It's a
emissões, né? A gente usa os
post-processor of
dados
these emissions. We
apenas,
use the data.
a gente tem o banco de dados, né, global
The
e os
database that we
locais.
have
A
globally
gente
and
utiliza o
locally,
Smoke para
we
preparar
use
esses
Smoke
dados,
to prepare this
gradeá-los
data
e fazer a
and
especiação química, né, dessas
have
emissões. Porque quando a
the
gente usa
chemical
os inventários
composition of
básicos,
this.
ele manda lá
Because when we
PM10,
use
PM2,5.
the
Mas para o CEMAC
environmental,
Smoke,
but
a gente
for CEMAC and
precisa
Smoke,
quais
we
são as
need
espécies do PM10, quais são as
to know
espécies do
what are the
PM2,5, quais são as
species of
espécies dos COBs.
PM10, which
Então,
are the
não é
calls.
trivial usar esses
So it's not
modelos, isso dá
trivial
tanto
to use these
trabalho, e a
templates
gente
that
está optando por
give
fazer o
a lot
Brasil
of work,
inteiro,
and
exatamente porque a
we're
gente vê
opting to
que
do this
é um
with
problema
Brazil
nacional, não é um problema de
because it is
Natal,
a
nem de
problem. It's
Maceió,
not
não, é de
Natal,
todo o
Maceió,
Brasil.
it's
Então, a gente
everyone.
vai prover, né, um banco de
So we're
dados.
going to show a bit of data.
Porque está demorando, peraí. Que tá putz, só um minuto, gente. Aqui. A gente está fazendo, essa é a nossa simulação
This is
inicial
our
para calibrar o
simulation, initial
modelo.
simulation to
Então, a
calibrate the
gente já rodou o
template.
WRF,
We
já
work with
rodamos
the
o Smoke, e agora a
WRF,
gente está na
Smoke,
rodada do
and
CEMAC.
we are
A gente está rodando o
in
ano
the
de
round of
2022
SENAC.
inteiro, com
We're
espaçamento de grade de 20 quilômetros.
working
E
with
aí a
the
ideia é que todos esses
environmental.
dados
So
fiquem
the idea is
disponíveis
for
numa
all this data to
plataforma
be available on
que
a
já
platform
existe, e
that
os
exists
grupos,
already,
né, das
and the
outras redes
groups
e que estão
of
em
the other
outros estados
networks
que
that are in
precisarem
other
utilizar,
states
eles vão
and
poder
need
fazer um
to use,
download
they
e
will
usar
be
esses
able
dados.
to
Então, não
make a
precisa vocês
download and use
rodarem
this
tudo
data.
novamente. Já
You
vai
don't
estar
need
aqui
to
o inventário,
run
a
everything,
meteorologia
the
e a qualidade do
inventory, the
ar. Então, a
methodology,
gente
and
só
the quality of
precisaria
the air.
fazer as
So we will
análises
need only to make an analysis
posteriormente um
and
downscaling para sua área,
a
né?
downscaling for your
Então,
area.
falando em downscaling, aqui eu estou
Talking
trazendo
on
só um
downscaling,
exemplo
I'm
de como é que
bringing
a gente
here
tem que
just an
utilizar esses
example on
resultados.
how
Isso aqui foi um
can we
downscaling que a gente
use this
fez
data. This
para
was a
Minas Gerais, para
downscaling
Belo
we did
Horizonte.
for
E
Minas
esse zoom
Gerais,
aqui,
Belo
nesse
Horizonte,
pontinho aqui,
and
isso aqui é
this zoom
Congonhas, que é um
here,
projeto que eu estou
this is
coordenando
Congonhas,
também.
that
Tem
is a
muitas
project
pessoas
I've been
do
coordinated,
Climápolis nesse
and we
projeto. Então,
have
aqui a gente consegue ver quais são,
with
grids,
the
né, nos
project.
grids
Here
aqui,
we have the
quais são as
grids,
fontes predominantes
which
e,
are the
consequentemente,
predominant
quais são as fontes que
sources
deveria ou poderia estar no
and
controle,
what
tá?
would
Outro exemplo
we
aqui já
be
do
able to
SEMAC, ou
work
seja,
with.
já de concentração.
This is a
Também Belo
concentration
Horizonte, e
already,
a gente
Belo
consegue fazer um
Horizonte,
zoom na área de
and
Congonhas
here we
e
have
verificar as regiões mais
Congonhas,
afetadas
and check the most affected regions, mining. So these are products that we are developing within Climapolis and are going to be available for everyone. reduction. We are able here to make proposals, goals.
Bom, como eu falei, esses dados ficarão todos dentro de banco de dados que já
as I mentioned, these data are going to be within the BRAIN, the platform, which is the Brazilian inventories. It is a consortium with Santa Catarina and the group of Professor Leonardo. And what we've been doing is to simulate in our servers. We're sharing the simulation in the UFMG and Santa Catarina, and to make this available in this platform that we super recommend for you to use, because we have data on WRF, inventories, gridded, and CEMAC. You just need to select the year, location, and use the data. This paper just was published in 2024, showing the importance of the tool and thanking the group of Professor Leonardo that has been dedicating themselves in the last years to do this.
A gente sabe que não é fácil, né? Porque fazer algo com financiamento local,
because do something with a local financing, it's like donating your own life for this. So next steps for this subnetwork of quality of the air, the most important that I would like to call attention is the experiment in the real world that we're planning for 2025. So talking with Judith and Jean was mentioned that October would be the adequate month to do this. So the Southeast cities that we understand that besides Climapolis focusing in São Paulo and Natal, we have a community in the whole country. So we're expanding our proposal for the experiment on the real world is September and October. In terms of Natal, is going to be to begin, and we would choose some days to make this experiment and every other cities that are available. So we would have September and October, and as Belo Horizonte, São Paulo, Rio,
Vitória, Campo
Grande, Florianópolis, Londrina, Porto Alegre, and if you have any other city that is interested in get in, our idea is to make a new version of this paper of 6 capitals. We're going to have 1 million and try to make an experiment in the real world at the same time for us to have the concentrations. And September is the typical month of burns, and September is going to be even drier because we're seeing the extremes. And after this experiment in the real world, we're going to reproduce the modeling, and in a smaller period, we need a lot of machines. It's 20 kilometers, so we're going to run the groups, and the new postdoc of the area back to modeling, and it's going to dedicate to the small areas. So the proposal is to have this group of Judith that are doing the modeling for Natal, and we would work in this scenario. Thank you.
Obrigada, professora Tassiana.
Thank you, Professor. Now, let's call Professor Newton Évora, professor from USP, its invitee and researcher, Department of Environmental Science in São Paulo. He teaches in graduation in environment, in the post-graduation in environmental that is integrated, besides working in the master research for climate change, science of Vascal. He coordinates the lab on air contamination, focus on anthropic and its impacts in this atmospheric, in the climate and quality of the air.
Ok. Bom dia a todos. Acho que essa sequência de apresentação foi oportuna.
Good morning.
Primeiro, o Anderson.
I believe this presentation was opportune. Anderson talking on monitoring.
Mais alto. Então, primeiro o Anderson falando sobre a questão do monitoramento, depois a Tassiana trouxe também a
Then
questão do
Tatiana
monitoramento
brought
modelagem.
another
Eu,
modeling.
na verdade, vou trazer um pouco da...
I would
Eu sempre
bring,
mudo a chave. Para quem
I
me
always
conhece, quando eu falo no
change.
dia a dia, o meu sotaque é
When
mais
I talk on
brasileiro. Quando
my
venho fazer
day-to-day, it's
apresentação,
more
parece que a
Brazilian.
chave
When I
vai um
move
pouco
to
para o lado.
Brazil, it
Português de
goes
Portugal,
to the.
minha herança cabo-verdiana. Eu, na verdade, vou trazer algumas
I
provocações
will bring some
no
provocations
sentido daquilo que a gente precisa
in
pensar,
the
avaliar para seguir.
what we have to think, assess.
Tá baixo? Tá bom, então. Vou estar perto, mais perto que isso, acho difícil. Então, vou falar mais alto. Mais perto. Então, eu vou falar um pouco sobre essa questão da modelagem,
I will
do
going to talk a
monitoramento aqui em
bit
São
on
Paulo,
this
os desafios que a
modeling, the
gente tem,
monitoring group
a
that we have, the
importância da
challenges we
integração
have, the importance of integration
desses dois
of
métodos
these
que a gente tem de
two
enfrentar o problema da
methods
poluição do
we
ar
have
e
to
também a
face
questão da
the
qualidade do ar
pollution of water and the quality of
dos
air
efeitos climáticos associados à
and
poluição
the
do ar.
climate effects related.
Eu, na verdade, eu fiz um levantamento daquilo que
I
tem em termos
raised
de revisão
information
para modelagem de
on
qualidade do ar.
what we have, a
Temos esses
modeling
dois
of
trabalhos
quality of the air. We
recentes
have these
do
two
membros do
recent works,
Climapolis,
members of Climapolis,
que trazem pouco
that
daquilo que a gente tem
bring
de desafios
some
dentro
of
desse
what we
contexto.
have
Então, tem o trabalho
as
da
challenges.
Vidia Calderon, é uma
We
revisão
have
das
Galder
modelagens feitas em relação à poluição do ar.
modeling.
Tem o trabalho do Adrien, também dentro do contexto do Climápolis,
And we have
discutindo
the
essa questão
point of
da
view of Adrian
representação
as well,
numérica da poluição aqui
discussing
para a
this
região metropolitana de São
presentation of
Paulo. Tem
contamination in the
vários
city of Sao
resultados
Paulo. We have
interessantes, esses
several
dois artigos
results,
trazem
interesting
bastante
results with
perspectivas. Por
two
exemplo, do Adrien,
articles here. Adrian
Derrubar, ele mostra que o conjunto de
shows
modelos tende a ter uma
that
performance melhor
some
na hora de
templates tend
representar
to have a better template
a poluição na
on
região metropolitana de São Paulo.
when
Esse é um
we
dos. Mas tem um
show
aspecto em particular
this
que
in
eu
the city of
gostaria
Sao Paulo.
de
But there's a
focar.
specific
No geral,
thing
esses
that I would like
artigos,
to
eles trazem
focus
como principais resultados
and
o ozônio e material particulado, que são os dois
in
poluentes que a
the
gente tem maiores
particulate,
desafios aqui na
there's
região
the
metropolitana
more
de São Paulo. Os
the
poluentes
two
que
pollutants
resultam
that we
com
have in the
ultrapassão dos
city of Sao
limites,
Paulo.
os
They
padrões
go
definidos.
beyond the
Mas tem um aspecto em
limitations of
particular
the
que eu acho que
patterns
esses
that we have. And
dois
this is an
artigos,
aspect,
essas duas revisões,
particular one,
uma
that these
revisão e
two
trabalho
revisions,
mais
one
de
and
modelagem
one
intensiva,
work of
nos pontos
modeling,
que
intensive modeling,
a gente
shows
a gente tem
is that we
desempenho melhor em
have
relação à previsão do
a
ozônio
better
do que em relação ao material particulado. Então,
performance
esse
than with the
aqui é
PM.
gráfico do trabalho do Adrien, do
This is a graph
coordenado por Adrien. Ele
of
mostra
the
que
work
a
we
gente
have.
tem
Here it
previsões feitas com
shows that we have some provisions done as a result of
em relação ao ozônio, essa
amount
primeira
of
parte aqui,
models based on
em
this
relação
in
ao
the first
padrão
part and
referente
based
ao
on
ozônio
the
aqui da
pattern
qualidade do ar.
related
Então,
to
nesses
ozone.
gráficos aqui, o que ele tenta mostrar é o
In these
seguinte:
graphs, what we have to
como que a
want to
gente
show
gera, quando a
here
gente gera
is
previsão em
how do
relação
we generate
à
when we
concentração desses
have
dois poluentes, qual que é a
provisions
quantidade
based on
de
these two
falso alarme
polluant,
ou
what
de assédio que a
is the
gente
amount
comete.
of false alarm and
Aí
assertiveness that
percebe-se
we
aqui que, por
have.
exemplo, no caso
Here
do
we
material
notice that
particulado,
in the case of the
aqui
PM,
embaixo dá para ver 50%, isso indica
here
falso
we can
alarme, né?
see
Aqui, falso alarme.
50% is a
Então, a gente
false
consegue
alarm.
ver que quando a
So we are
modelagem
able
faz
to
essa
see
previsão,
that what the
a gente tem
modeling
percentual
does,
alto de falso alarme,
we have a
50%,
high
aqui
percentage,
62%
50%,
e 33%. No caso
63%,
do
and
ozônio, não, geralmente os
33%. In
falsos
the
alarmes
case
são
of
bem
ozone,
baixos, os
the
acertos
false
são
alarms are
maiores.
low.
E esse é o gráfico da revisão
This is
feita
the
pela Vidia
revision
Calderon.
of the graph that we
A
did
gente
in
vê aqui as
Calderon.
correlações entre
Here we
observação
have the
e
correlations
modelagem.
between
Para o ozônio,
observation
você vê que as
and
correlações são altas,
modeling. Here you
mas
see
no
that
caso
they
do
are
material particulado,
high,
as correlações são bem
and
mais
in
baixas, né?
PM they
Então,
are
não temos
much
desempenho
lower.
tão bom como a gente tem para o ozônio.
So this is
Então,
what
esse é
we
um
have
desafio que a
for
gente
the
tem
ozone.
em relação ao
And
material
this
particulado,
challenge
a
related
poluição do ar
to,
associada ao material particulado.
because it's
O
the
Anderson,
contamination
na
of the air
questão dos desafios
based on
da
this.
observação, eu
Anderson was
trago
talking
uma
about the
perspectiva
challenges
sobre
of
os desafios da
observation. This is a
modelagem.
perspective on the modeling.
E o que está por trás?
And what is
desafios que a gente tem em relação ao
beyond
modelar
this?
material
We have
particulado.
to modulate
A
the
emissão
PM.
é um aspecto central, são vários
Emission
aspectos,
is
realmente.
something very important,
Não
where
tenho
a
pretensão
lot
de
of
explorar
aspects.
todos,
I don't want
mas
to explore all,
vou elencar alguns que são
but
destacados
I'm going
nesses
to
dois
show
artigos. A
some
questão
that
da
are
emissão,
highlighted in
a
these
ausência
two
de
articles.
fontes, a ausência de representação da formação secundária
Lack
dos aerossóis,
of
que é um desafio. A
presence
representação
of
de emissões biogênicas,
aerosols,
emissões de biomassa e queima de
emissions,
biomassa, que a gente
biomass,
sempre tem
burn,
pelo Brasil afora.
that we
Essa é
know
uma
we
dificuldade,
have
na verdade, você modelar
in
esse
Brazil.
transporte, essa
It's a
interação com a
challenge
poluição
to
local.
model
Esse
this
ainda é uma
and
coisa que a gente tem um
related
desafio
to
grande.
local emission, and we have a huge
Aspecto
challenge.
desses artigos que
The
geralmente
aspect that
fazem
these
muita
articles that
modelagem
show
da
this
poluição
modeling
em São Paulo,
of the
maior parte
contamination
desses
in Sao
artigos
Paulo, most part
concentram-se
of these
no
are
período de transição
concentrated
entre o
in the
inverno
period of
e a
transition between
primavera.
the
Esse é
winter
período
and
particularmente
spring.
difícil do ponto
This
de vista do
particularly
cenário que
is
se tem, um cenário
difficult
extremamente
based on the
complexo.
scenario that we have. We have an
E claro que isso
extremely
traz também
difficult
desafio maior na hora de você representar
scenario, and we
material
have a
particulado.
challenge that is even
E
larger.
obviamente tem essa questão que já foi
And obviously, we
reforçada
have
anteriormente nas
this question
apresentações.
that was
A gente
reinforced
tem
in this,
uma ausência
and we
de
have an
observações,
absence of
principalmente nas áreas rurais. A gente
observations,
tem desafio
mostly
grande
in rural areas. We
que
have a
a
huge
questão das
challenge
observações.
that is the
Esses dois
observations.
trabalhos,
And
eles,
these
de
two
certa forma,
works
orientam entre as
certainly orient
recomendações que são
between
feitas,
the recommendations that are
essa
done,
questão de explorar o impacto
this
climático sobre a
exploring
qualidade do
the
ar, que é um
climate
aspecto importante,
impact of the quality of the air,
e o uso de dados satélite, que é
and
ponto também
usage of satellite
trazido
cities.
pela
That is
apresentação do
something
Anderson.
brought by the
Então,
presentation of
eu
Anderson.
fui nessa linha, então
So
eu
in
vendo
this
atrás desses dois
sense, I
aspectos
was
para trazer as
back
reflexões que
to these
eu
two
gostaria de
aspects
colocar aqui para a gente
to bring the
conversar depois.
reflections I wanted
Em
for us
relação à
to talk
observação,
later.
já foi mostrado, mas eu
Based on
reforço
this that were
aqui,
shown,
essa é a
I
nossa
reinforced
rede,
here, this is our network,
uma amostra da rede de monitoramento de poluição do ar aqui de São
and
Paulo, baseada
the
em dados in
monitoring
situ.
of contamination of
E aqui a
the
gente tem
air
panorama
based on
a
the
partir do satélite,
prerequisites. And
que
here we
usa
have a
a unidade
panorama,
ótica do aerossol. E aqui a gente
and
tem
based on
concentrações
the aerosol, and
próximas
here we
superfície.
have
Não dá
some
para negar que
concentrations on the surface.
tem
On the
o
surface,
satélite, ele de alguma forma
it's
ele
undeniable that
reflete
a
panorama
satellite
de poluição do ar que
reflects
existe em
a
São Paulo,
panorama
com
of the
a configuração
contamination
ótica
of the
mais
air
alta
that
aqui na
is
região
the
metropolitana.
deepening of
E
the
aqui as concentrações
metro
auditivas
region, and
também.
these are the
Aqui você vê que
concentrations.
cai a concentração.
Here
Também
we
entra
see
numa área
that the
mais
concentration diminished.
menos poluída em termos de
This is a
recenseamento
less
geral.
contaminated area.
A questão principal que a gente está atrás, a gente
The
consegue
main
extrair
thing that
dessa
we're
informação do
talking about
satélite
here, we can extract from
dado
the
que é possível
satellite a
integrar
data
dentro desse
that is
sistema
possible to
legal
integrate within the system
de monitoramento e qualidade do ar.
on
Esse é
monitoring
o
and
grande
quality
desafio
of
que
the
a gente
air.
tem do ponto de vista da aplicação de
This
satélites
is what
na
we have
qualidade do
in
ar. Tem
in the sense of application.
aspecto aí que a gente consegue
We have an
identificar áreas
aspect
poluídas
that
no
we
estado,
can
mas até transformar
identify,
isso num dado,
but
a
up
gente tem desafio
until we
importante,
transform this, we have
muito
a
com potencial para
challenge
ser usado na legislação
to
ou
be
do
used
ponto de
in
vista do
legislation in
sistema
the point
de
of view
monitoramento
of
de
the
qualidade do ar.
system and monitoring of the quality of the
Satélite
air.
e monitoramento em si são
Satellite
vetor
and
relativamente diferentes,
monitoring,
não necessariamente iguais, assim, em termos de massa de ar. Eles veem massas de ar diferentes e a gente tem
we
uma
see
expectativa de que a
different
gente
air
possa traduzir
masses,
essa
and we have a
informação, que é uma
expectation that we can
informação similar
translate this
àquela
and
da
have an
superfície.
information
Só que a gente
similar
sabe que
to
existem
this
vários desafios para
surface, but
isso.
we know
Eu
that we
acho
have
que
a
um
lot of
desafio que eu gostaria
challenges
de
in this
destacar
sense.
aqui é essa
Something I would like
sazonalidade.
to
Aqui a
highlight, this is
sazonalidade do conteúdo de
seasonality
poluição na atmosfera
in
de
the
São
sense
Paulo
of the
a partir do
contamination
satélite. Então,
of
a gente consegue ver o pico
from
aqui em
the
agosto, setembro.
satellite. Here we
E é
have
claramente um pico associado com a
a
questão das
peak. This is
queimadas.
a
Então, quando
peak
a gente olha toda a
related
coluna
to
atmosférica de São Paulo, a gente está vendo um sinal
fires.
fortemente
So here
propício
we
às
have
grandes
a
queimadas que acontecem no
highly
Brasil. Quando a gente vem para o
impact
monitoramento in
for
situ, o
the
pico é
burns, the
julho,
fires that
é
we have.
deslocado
The peak is
mais
July and
para o
is
inverno mesmo.
taken more to the
E
winter.
mostra realmente a dinâmica
That
mais associada
shows
à
the
redução e emissão
dynamic
de poluição
associated
na
to
região
emission
de São Paulo.
in the
Então,
region of Sao
sazonalmente, a
Paulo.
gente ainda tem esse
So
desafio, não
the
consegue trazer
seasoning
esses dois,
is,
não
we are
consegue
not
identificar
able to
casamento
identify
entre os dois
both
indicadores de poluição
within
do ar.
with the
Como
two
chegar
indicators
no
of the
indicador a
contamination of
partir
the
do
air.
satélite
How can we
e
get
realmente
there
reproduzir
through the
isso? Esse é um desafio
satellite
que a
and
gente tem.
reproduce
Se a
this?
gente conseguir no
This
momento
is a
em que o
challenge we
indicador
have.
reproduz essas sazonalidades de
If you have an
superfície,
indicator that
bom caminho
reproduces these
andado.
surfaces, it's a good path.
Aqui a gente tem trabalho da Macena et al.
Here we
2021,
have
semelhança
a
aos
work
trabalhos
that
do
we have in
Anderson e outros
21.
trabalhos anteriores mostram que realmente quando a gente tenta
And
aplicar a satélite para extrair
a
um indicador do ar
satellite
na superfície, os resultados não são bons.
and
não são definitivamente bons. As correlações são
And
baixíssimas.
these are
Então,
very
num primeiro
low.
momento,
And the application, and for São Paulo, we have at least a bit moment. And here, we have a huge challenge. The big thing.
Por outro lado, você tem aspecto importante que entra nessa discussão, que é a
And we
caracterização
have a
das propriedades
specific
ósseas dos
thing
aerossóis.
that
Das
have the
partículas que a gente
properties
tem
and the
aqui na região metropolitana de
particulars
São Paulo.
we have
E
in the
aí,
metro region of
vem uma
São
conexão
Paulo.
importante com a questão climática. Aí puxo para
We
dentro
have
dessa
a
discussão questão
situation with
climática.
climate change, and we have
Esse
this.
gráfico aqui mostra a capacidade
And
de absorção desse eixo aqui. Quanto maior
And
esse indicador, óbvio,
the
esse
larger
dos
the indicator,
mais
the
menos absorvedor,
the sprays,
quanto
and
menor,
less
mais absorvedor. Se a gente olhar
observance.
aqui para
So if we
vários
see
locais da
here,
América do
this is
Sul.
for
Se a gente
South
olhar aqui em
America,
vermelho, esse triângulo vermelho,
and
representa
we
São
see
Paulo.
here,
São Paulo tem maior range, maior variabilidade,
São Paulo
capacidade de
has
absorção
the
de
larger
aerossóis, na
range,
América do Sul, pelo menos nas estações monitoradas,
and
que já nos coloca um desafio de cara.
and
E a gente tem
put
aqui
a
trabalho,
challenge
que
there.
o resultado de um trabalho do Vanderlei, que
We
mostra
have a
que
Vanderlei
o
that
aerossol de São Paulo, ele é um aerossol
and
extremamente absorvedor, graças ao
it
quê?
was
A uma fração
absorbed
altíssima de black carbon que
because
existe
we have the high
nesse aerossol. E, além do mais, tem uma outra contribuição que não é black carbon, de absorção,
and the black
que
carbon
ainda
absorption.
a gente tem um trabalho longo à frente para caracterizar.
And
Então, a gente tem esses dois aspectos
we have these
associados
two
a um
aspects
componente importante da qualidade do ar, mas com impacto
and
significativo do ponto de
the
vista climático.
significant
Então,
impact in the sense of the
obviamente,
climate.
isso já
Obviously,
requer o quê? Requer uma integração
and
do
requires
monitoramento por satélite,
um,
já
a
desse desafio da
modeling and
representação
the
da qualidade do ar
challenge
pelo
of the
satélite,
representation
depende desse
of the
aspecto também.
satellite
E esse aspecto da absorção do
and
aerossol,
the aspect
aspectos mais críticos nessa simulação do impacto dos aerossóis no clima. Então, a gente
and
tem esse
in
desafio.
climate. So we have this
Aqui
challenge.
resultado de um trabalho em Amazônia e tal, do qual também participei.
And
A gente vê o efeito do
I
aerossol, a
participated on this and the
impacto
effect
direto do
of
aerossol
the
na radiação. Então, a
spray
gente vê que
and
tem
the
período do
effect
ano
of
que
this.
realmente a redução
So the
da radiação solar nas
reduction
superfícies somente
on
pelo efeito dos
the
aerossóis, ele é
variation
significativo.
because of the
Ele
effect of the
quase que iguala
aerosols
aquele efeito
of
das
the
nuvens, se a
sprays,
gente olhar nesse
they
período
have the
aqui.
effect of the
E,
um,
obviamente, se a gente
clouds. So
recuperar
obviously, if we
aquilo que a gente conhece como
recover
potencial
what
impacto dos
we
aerossóis
know for the
absorvedores
potential impact
no
of
estrutura
the
termodinâmica da
absorbs
atmosfera, que é o que a gente
in
tem,
the
nesse caso
thermodynamic
aqui,
of
que
the
é um caso
atmosphere,
que
in
é
this
mais uma
case,
condição de São Paulo,
that
você tem
is more the
presença de
condition
aeroportos
of Sao
super
Paulo, we
absorvedor
have
dentro da sua atmosfera.
this
Esses
amount
efeitos
of
termodinâmicos,
effect,
obviamente, vão ter
this
implicações para aqui, para a
thermodynamic
própria qualidade do ar,
effects
para
has
próprio
for the quality of
representação
the air and the
encapsulada das
representation
superfícies feito pelos
of
modelos de
the
qualidade do ar.
PM in the
Então,
surface.
esse é um aspecto que eu gostaria de
This
trazer.
is an
E
aspect
aí
that
a
I would
gente
like to
pega o
bring.
caso de
And here
2024,
we
que
have
talvez seja um
a
caso
case of
exemplar, se a gente
2024 that
tem
can be
interesse
an
em explorar essa
example
questão em
if we
relação
want to
mudança,
explore
efeito
this
climático com
interaction
a questão do
in
monitoramento
climate
da
and
qualidade do ar,
monitoring of
da
the
modelagem
quality
de
of the
qualidade do
air.
ar. Esses são esse é um teste que a
And
gente também publicou. Eu incluí
and
2024,
I
não está no
included
trabalho, mas incluí
2024 and
Esses são
2024. These are the
cenários mais
6 scenarios that are more critical
de transporte de
on
calcula regional de queimadas nos últimos 20 anos.
burns and fires in the last
2024
years.
superou
2024
tanto em termos de
was
área como em
larger
termos da
in
média
terms
da
of area
quantidade de
and the
aerossol que você
amount
tem
of spray that
dentro
we
dessa área.
have within this area.
Se a gente pegar
And
2017, que foi
if
esse, a
we
gente já
get,
incluiu nesse paper, essa
and it's
avaliação, o
included in this
impacto
paper, this
que essa
assessment of the
curva regional teve
impact
na
that
radiação
this region
do
had
ponto de
in the
vista regional,
radiation in
você
terms
cria
of the regional.
gradiente,
We have a
digamos,
gradient
zonal
as
entre oeste e leste,
area between
total,
east
do
and
ponto de vista da
west
radiação.
that is
Qual que é o
total in
impacto
terms
disso
of
do ponto de
radiation
vista
and the impact
meteorológico
of
e qual
this
que é a
in terms
consequência disso
of
no
meteorology and the
contexto
incidence
da
of this in the
simulação da absorção
context
do ar
of
aqui para
the
São Paulo.
simulation here for
E
São
aí,
Paulo.
obviamente, essa
And
informação é
obviously,
porque
this
agora qual que é o impacto de
information, we
2024
have to
nesse
see
cenário?
which is
A gente tem
the
uma expectativa,
impact of
claro, que é um
2024.
impacto maior e,
The impact is
consequentemente, você espera que isso
larger,
tenha implicações.
and we expect
E
this to
aí
have
eu termino com esse
implications.
slide, que é o
So I end
seguinte,
with this slide saying,
do ponto de vista do
in the
monitoramento
point
por
of view of
satélite,
monitoring by
hoje se chega à
satellite,
conclusão, pelo menos os
presently
trabalhos,
we have
inclusive
the
do grupo que
conclusion,
o
even
Anderson
with the
contou
with the
aqui lá
papers that
dos Estados
even
Unidos,
Anderson
de
were
que a
sharing here
integração
from
da
the United
modelagem, para
States,
você
the
aprimorar a
integration of
previsão e
modeling
a
to
capacidade do
improve
satélite prever a
the
qualidade do ar
capability
é
of the
fundamental.
satellite, it's
Só
fundamental.
que essa modelagem precisa ser uma modelagem
But this
consistente,
modeling
coerente, que
needs
integra
to
as duas
be
coisas, qualidade do ar
coherent and
e o
integrate
efeito
both
climático.
things, the climate
Então, aqui a
effect.
gente traz
So here
esse
we
arranjo, esses
bring
são alguns pontos
this
tratados
arrangement.
aqui
These
por esse
are
artigo
some
recente do grupo
of the matters that were
forte
treated in
nessa
this
linha de
recent
usar
work
satélite para prever a qualidade do
to
ar.
use satellite
Então,
to
você
preview the quality
tem
of the air.
alinhamento
And
no
here we
sentido de
have some
usar a
alignings in the
modelagem
sense of
para
using the modeling
treinar a
to
relação
train
VOD, o que o satélite
the
provém, e a
relationship between the
material
UAD
vertical
and
na
what we
superfície.
have in
E aí você
the
fazer essa aplicação em
particulate
larga escala para os satélites. Claro que quanto
and
melhor o seu
large
modelo
scale.
regional, essa
The
relação
bigger
que você
the
estabelece tem
model,
melhor qualidade.
the
Você, em
relation we
princípio, vai
establish
aprimorar
have
o
better
desempenho do
quality
satélite
because
na hora
it's
de
going
prever.
to
A gente
improve
não tem como fugir disso, apesar
what
dos
we have.
resultados
There's no way of getting
não
out of
serem
it,
tão positivos do ponto de
despite
vista da
the
previsão
results
da
are not
qualidade
so
a
positive
partir do
based
satélite.
on the
Mas eu
quality of
pergunto
the
isso porque tem uma frota de
air.
satélites hoje funcionando e com previsão de ser lançados
And how we're
que
going
vão
to launch this,
nessa linha
and
de
they go
usar
in this
essa
line to
ferramenta para
use
monitoramento da qualidade do ar. Então, nós
this
precisamos
for the
exatamente
monitoring of the
fazer
quality
esse
of the air
esforço conjunto, modelagem,
and
qualidade do
the
ar,
gathering
clima,
of the modeling,
observação,
climate,
satélite,
observation,
para a gente
satellite, for
aproveitar essa
us
linha
to
de desenvolvimento do ponto de vista do monitoramento
take care of
climático
this
e de qualidade do ar
monitoring in terms of the
que esses
quality of the air
satélites vão
that
trazer,
these
além de toda
satellites
a
are
parte da
going to
modelagem.
bring.
É isso. Obrigado.
That was all. Thank you.
Obrigada, professor
Thank
Newton.
you.
Agora, a última palestrante é a professora Rita
The
Alves,
last presentation is going to be
professor
Professor
titular no
Rita
Instituto de
Alves
Geociências da Universidade Federal do Rio Grande do
from the
Sul.
University
Atua nos
of
cursos
Rio
de
Grande do Sul.
Geologia,
She works in
Geografia e Engenharia
geology,
Ambiental. Orienta um
environmental,
programa de
energy,
pós-graduação em
and she
sensoriamento
is
remoto
teacher in the remote sensoring
e coordena o laboratório de meteorologia
and coordinate the
e qualidade do
meteorology
ar.
lab
Trabalha com
and
poluição
quality of the air. She
atmosférica,
works in atmosphere contamination
previsão de eventos extremos.
and revision of extreme events.
Bom dia, obrigada pelo convite.
Morning. Thank
Acho
you.
que eu tenho que arrumar. Peraí. Não começa contando pontos. O tempo. Deixa eu me achar. Aqui. Aqui. Peraí, deixa eu só. Aqui. Isso, certo? Isso. Bom, eu quero agradecer, então, o convite,
I would like
né,
to thank the invitation,
da Fátima, Judite,
Fatima,
enfim.
Judith.
E eu vou trazer
I will
mais,
bring
alguns trabalhos e o que a gente
some
vem desenvolvendo
works
na
and what we've been
universidade,
developing in the
na
university
região sul.
in southern Brazil.
Então, eu coloquei um título. Eu não. Deixa eu só. Peraí. Acho que assim tá bom. Tá. Caracterização, né, do
Characterization of the monitoring
monitoramento e previsão da qualidade do ar
and
na região
provision of
metropolitana
the
de
quality
Porto
of the air
Alegre,
in the metro region of Porto
municípios,
Alegre,
alguns
municipalities
municípios, né, do estado,
of
como
the
Rio
state
Grande e
as
Candiota.
Rio Grande,
Também a gente
Candiota.
tem alguns trabalhos com
We also
Capivari de
have
Baixo,
some
onde tem uma
works
termoelétrica,
done
e
in Capivari de
um outro
Baixo
trabalho com o município de
and
Figueira,
other one with
também
Figueira
tem uma outra
that
termoelétrica.
has
Lá no
another
laboratório, a gente
thermoelectrical. On the
desenvolve algumas
lab, we
pesquisas e
develop
projetos
some
relacionados à
researches
parte de
and
dispersão de
projects
poluentes,
related to
modelagem,
polluants,
monitoramento através de estações de
monitoring
qualidade do
through
ar
stations
e
of quality
também
of the air,
alguns
and
experimentos
some
na região que a gente
experiments
sempre
on the
acaba
region that we
realizar.
always end up doing.
Colocar algumas etapas, tá? Então, para
Let's
esses
add
municípios
some stages for these
que eu
municipalities, and I'm
coloquei,
going to mention
no geral, a
here.
gente faz
In general,
experimentos,
we
algumas
work
campanhas
with some
experimentais,
experiments, some
onde
campaigns,
instalamos
where
estações
we install
meteorológicas
stations,
compactas, de qualidade
meteorological
do ar
compact
e
with quality of the air
meteorologia, né, para a gente
and
já
meteorology,
os resultados e dados.
because we end up
Também a
having
gente tem
results and
todo
data.
banco de dados
We also
organizado
have a database that is
para
organized
caracterizar o
and
desenvolvimento
to
e
characterize
parametrizações de
the
modelos de mesma
development
escala, enfim,
and
para
the
trabalhar, né,
templates
com
to
esses
work
modelos.
with these templates. We also, the group works with aerial basin. We work this in Candiota, talking about a municipality of Rio Grande where we have an industrial area that is very robust. In Porto Alegre region as well, and Varí de Baixo, where we have some electrical and Figueira as well. For this study of the basin, we usually have the dispersion model that is used with information of the template of BRF. But afterwards, we have the development of an operational development where we run the template of BRF, and it's a resolution of space in the order of 600 meters for all these regions. We have simulations, numeric simulations, and with this distribution in the format of maps. And with this, as a result, we have the unfolding for the environmental management, both municipalities and development. This is the compact area that we have 6 stations where they are distributed in some municipalities, and they have the continuous monitoring of gases and PM. We have PM 1, 2, and 10. And gases. And the transmission is online, and we need to have every 5 minutes. And these are the thermoelectrical areas. And this is the thermoelectrical power plant that we have in Paraná. It generates around 20 mega, and we have 40 meters. There we did all the assessment of the particulate material and also precipitation. And we do the monitoring we have a more urban area, rural area, and mining. Here we have a stray, and we're able to do the assessment. Here we have Candiota region. We have 2 plants that generate 350 mega, and we end up doing the same kind of experiment where we put the system here that we added with PM, thick and thin, with 3 different areas. One area within mining, other pampa, and soy. We also, beside the chemical elements, we work with gas emissions. This just to illustrate the area of Rio Grande. We have the main undertaking. It's an industrial area that practically are industries of fertilizers installed in this region. And what calls our attention is the height of these fonts that are very low, and the region is complicated. Here we have some examples on the data. We have 2 stations in one municipality here in Rio Grande, one in the urban area, and other one within the harbor of Rio Grande, to see how was the behavior, both the meteorological conditions and the part of contamination. I selected here some graphs to show what we were doing and share that graphs. We organize the tables for each day and how was the average of these concentrations. Here is an example of the, here we have clicking, we have the information, meteorological information, and the quality of the air. In these campaigns, besides this monitoring, we have some caring and to see the behavior
Nós temos, então, uma
So we
divisória, né, os
have
balões, enfim.
the balloons and all the cares, and this launching when we do some campaigns that are more detailed. We launch the balloons every 3 hours, and we are able to have a mapping.
Aqui é só uma ilustração, então, dos perfis
This is just an
verticais
illustration of the
da
profiles
velocidade e temperatura potencial.
of the
E
speed
aqui é
of the temperature,
a
and
outra-
here
outro
this
empreendimento, que é uma
is the
térmica
other
aqui de
undertaking that we
baixo, a usina
have,
termoelétrica Jorge
the
Lacerda. São 7 chaminés
power
de
plant that we
diferentes
have.
alturas,
There's
e esse
different
empreendimento
heights,
fica no
and
meio
this
de vale,
undertaking
então é
is
bem complexo,
in
assim,
the
é
middle
bem
of a valley,
interessante
so
de
it's very
trabalhar ali.
complex,
Então,
and it's interesting to work there.
continuando, né?
So,
Nessa parte
continuing
das
in this part
concentrações dos
of the
elementos
concentrations
químicos,
of the
nós
chemical
instalamos
elements,
os
we
robôs,
installed
onde a gente fica fazendo essas medições de
where we are
altura,
able
particulado
to
fino,
do
material
this
particulado grosso.
work with
Num
the
período, em geral, a gente
materials,
fica
the
20 dias
PM,
no campo, consegue aproveitar
and
5, 6, 7
we
dias
are
no
able
campo,
to
devido
work
às condições meteorológicas, enfim.
with the
Então, usamos os
meteorological
campos, usamos nessa
works,
região de Candiota, a gente tem
and we
5
work this in the
estações,
Candiota
são
region.
daquelas
We have 5
estações,
stations that are those
esqueci o nome. Bom, as estações convencionais, né,
the
de qualidade
conventional
do ar, com todos
stations of
os
quality of the
gases,
air
né,
with
superior
all
particulado. E aqui
the
nós colocamos
material
também a nossa
PM,
estação, fizemos toda uma
and
comparação, tanto da
we did a
estação
comparison both
compacta,
with the
quanto do
compact
que estava
station
medindo no material
and of
particulado
what
fino e material
was being
particulado
measured
grosso.
in the
Depois, além
thin
das
and thick
medições, a gente fez
PM.
as
And after
análises
this
também dos elementos
measurement, we did the
químicos e das
analysis of the
concentrações
chemical
desses elementos
analysis
químicos.
and
Aqui o
the
laboratório de
analysis of
química,
the elements.
nós temos muita
And in the
parceria, né,
lab,
com
we have
várias
partnership
áreas da
with
universidade.
several areas
E
of the
aqui, só
university.
para ilustrar, né, então,
And to
do
illustrate
laboratório. E aqui alguns exemplos,
what we
alguns
worked in the
resultados, né, usados dessas medidas, o que que a gente coletou no
and what we
caso,
collected.
essas medidas foram em Candiota, na região de Candiota.
And
Isso aqui foi legal porque eu comparei com o que a gente tinha feito na época do meu
this is where I
mestrado, em
compared
50
what we've been
casos.
doing in my
O que eu fiquei
master's
impressionada é
work,
que
and I
a
was
gente conseguiu
impressed
uma redução
that we were
significativa,
able to
porque
have a
eles
significant
fizeram
reduction,
várias reformas,
and
né,
they did a
nas
lot
quer
of
dizer, melhoraram,
reforms,
né,
and they
tipo de
improved
emissão, melhoraram os
the
filtros, enfim, e aí teve uma redução bem significativa. E aqui a
and we
metodologia
have
para
a
amostragem da
significant
precipitação.
reduction,
Nós
and
pegamos
this
2
showing
pontômetros,
the
colocamos um do lado do outro, e
precipitation.
essa
We had
garrafa âmbar,
one
porque
next to the
no
other,
caso
and this
dessa
huge
coleta de água de
uh,
chuva,
area
tem uma
that we
aluna,
have in
minha
the
aluna de
rain
doutorado, ela estava
collection.
estudando
I
mais a
have
parte
my
do
student
mercúrio,
here that
então
was
tem toda uma
talking on mercury,
metodologia a ser
and we
seguida,
have
e aí
a
fizemos também a coleta
methodologies,
da água de chuva.
and we
Então,
have a
aqui
collection
alguns
of
resultados também
water
das diferentes
fall
áreas, no caso
and rainfall. And
eu
in the
fiz uma, aqui
case,
tem uma
I was
comparação entre
doing a
alternativa.
comparison between
Tá. Então vamos mais rápido. Bom, outra área também são as estimativas, então, do
the
carbono,
other
do
area
estado de
is the
carbono de
estimatives of
superfície,
the
onde a
carbon
gente
and
usa
the
técnicas
surface,
também de
where we use
sensoriamento
some
remoto,
techniques
além de
of
parâmetros de biomassa, que a gente
remote
fez medições,
sensoring
né,
and
do estado
biomass
de
as well,
carbono
that
em
we did
parcelas de
some
campo, coleta de
studies and
vegetação,
collection
e
of
também utilizou
vegetation.
essas câmaras fechadas
And
para
we
avaliação das
have
concentrações de
the
gases,
closed cameras for concentration of gas
através de cromatografia gasosa em
through
solo.
chromatography.
Aqui as diferentes áreas onde a gente
And
instalou os
different
equipamentos
areas where we
das
installed
medidas.
equipment on the
Aqui o
measurement.
método de câmeras
This is the
fechadas com as
method
placas
of
gasosas
closed
entre a superfície e a
cameras
atmosfera. A Bruna
between the
fez o
surface
doutorado
and the
dela
atmosphere.
nessa área.
Bruna did her doctorate in
Também
this
a coleta
area.
de vegetação naqueles 3
Collection
carbonídeos
of vegetation
diferentes
with these
e
3
coleta
different
de solo, né,
places
para
and
ter as informações de carbono no solo. Foi
soil to
interessante
have the
é que das
measurement
3
of the
áreas,
soil.
uma área era da
What is
fazenda,
interesting
né,
is
onde a
that
gente
all the
tinha uma
areas in the area
plantação
of
de
the
soja, no
where we
sítio era
had
uma área de pampa
a plantation
e
of
tínhamos a
soy,
área
it
de
was
mineração.
pampa and
E
the
esse
mining
fluxo
as
de
well.
CO2 ele
This
foi
flow
menor na
of
área de
CO2
mineração
was
quando a gente
smaller
compara,
in the
né, os
mining area
outros
when we compare
empreendimentos. É um
the
resultado
other
bem interessante, foi a
undertakings.
tese de doutorado de uma
It's
aluna.
a very
Aqui é só
interesting
para ilustrar,
result.
então, a parte
Here,
das
just to
avaliações, né,
illustrate
que a gente
the
fazia
part of
na
the
parte
assessments
aérea
that we
para esses
did
empreendimentos todos que eu
for
citei
these
anteriormente.
undertakings,
Aqui é um sistema que
Here
nós já
is the
organizamos
system
para
that we
todos os
already
aqueles
organized
municípios
for
também
all
de
these
previsão da
municipalities
qualidade
as
do ar.
well, at the
Aqui
preview
eu
of the
coloquei
quality of
Rio
the air.
Grande, nós
And I added
rodamos esse
here Rio
modelo
Grande.
operacional com
We
três
run this
grades
template
alinhadas,
with 3
onde
grids,
resolução mais baixa da ordem
and
de 600 metros
the
para a grade
resolution, low
3.
resolution
E
to
aqui são os principais, né, gases,
600 meters.
material
And here we
particulado.
have gases and
Então,
PM.
a ideia é que tu consigas,
The
né, em cada
idea
coordenada, tu vais ter a variação temporal,
is so
tanto da
that in
parte
every coordinate, you're
meteorológica
going to have
quanto
the
das
assessment, both for the
concentrações dos
meteorological
diferentes
part and the
gases e
concentration
matéria
of different
particulada.
gases
Esse aqui é
and
um
PM.
produto, então, que também é gerado,
This is a
né, através
product that is generated
desses
through
projetos todos. Esse
these
projeto com o Rio
projects.
Grande eu achei super
This
legal, um
one
projeto
with
com a
Rio
prefeitura,
Grande was
Secretaria de
very
Meio
nice, that
Ambiente da
was done
prefeitura, que se
with the
inspirou, né,
City
em
Hall
desenvolver trabalho nesse
and
porte.
was
E a
involved
ideia,
in
então, é que a gente vai
developing
usar
this.
esse sistema todo,
And
né,
it's
de
interesting to generate this
informações
system with
geográficas,
information, geographical
onde em
information,
qualquer ponto de grade
where
que tu clique, tu tem
at
todas essas
any point of the
informações
grid you click, you have all the
automatizadas.
information
Aqui
automatized.
são as áreas de conhecimento que a
These
gente
are
tem
the
parcerias na
areas,
URGS, né? Então
knowledge
são
areas that we have
diferentes áreas de pesquisa.
in
E a
different
ideia
areas
aqui,
of
então, é
research, and
elaborar
the idea is to
de ações
elaborate a template
direcionadas essa área ambiental com dados
directed to the
climatológicos,
environmental area with
geológicos, geográficos,
climate
geomorfológicos,
data
solo,
and
vegetação, etc.
geomorphological
E
vegetation and
como
soil.
resultado, então, né,
And
produto
as
para
a
implementação
result,
operacional junto
for
tanto
the
aos órgãos
operational
ambientais
implementation,
quanto aos
both for
empreendimentos industriais.
environment
E
and
para isso, a
industrial.
ideia é gerar mapas
And for
com
that is to
avaliações
generate
ambientais
maps
baixa, muito
with
baixa,
some
média, muito alta,
assessments
etc.,
that is high,
que é
low,
uma ferramenta
medium, or
super
very high or very
importante,
low.
né, para as
That
áreas
is a
mais
tool that is
vulneráveis
very
que
important for the more vulnerable
necessitam
areas
ações
that needs
mitigadoras. Também as diferentes
mitigation.
áreas aqui estudadas são
Different areas
analisadas,
here studies
identificadas
are
e
analyzed,
classificadas de
identified, and
acordo com a
classified
localização em uma ou mais
in
classes
accordance
de
with the
disponibilidades
localization
nas
and other
avaliações
availability
ambientais.
in the
E a ideia,
assessments.
então, é que esse banco de dados
And the
todos,
idea is for
ele
this
vai sendo
database
gerado, né,
that being
seja
generated
espacializado
to
geográfico,
be
os dados
spaced
gráficos e georreferenciados,
with
e
graph.
com isso a gente vai conseguir, né, emitir uma análise e através
With
de
this, we'll
consulta.
be able to
Por exemplo,
issue
vai
an
ter toda uma
analysis, and
página onde tu
we
vais clicar
have a lot, a whole
local
page
onde tu quiseres e tu
explaining
vais ter
the
a
place where you
informação
want to
online em
have,
qualquer
and
uma
you're
das
going to have the
coordenadas.
information
E
online for
não,
any
acho que
of the coordinates. And the
principal foco, né, desse trabalho
main
todo é a
focus
formação
of
e
this work
capacitação de recursos
is
humanos, porque a
training
universidade, essa
of
parte
human
toda
resources, because
operacional,
university,
então,
all the
é
operational
implementar
area, the
dentro
idea is
dos
to
órgãos
implement
ambientais, né,
within the
e
environmental
nós, da
organs,
academia,
and us
desenvolver e
from academia
capacitar a
develop
formação de
and
recursos humanos
train
enfim.
human
E aqui as
resources.
aplicações, então, preventivas,
Here are the
mitigadoras,
applications:
remediadoras,
preventive,
compensatórias, né,
mitigator,
estabelecer protocolos de
remediatories, and
atuação conjunta entre
compensatories.
esses diferentes
Have
empreendimentos,
protocols
porque
between these
não só os órgãos
undertakings,
ambientais, mas os
and not
empreendimentos,
only
eles
the
têm que trabalhar em
environmental
parceria, porque
organs,
em condições, por exemplo,
but
atmosféricas
we need to
mais
work because in
complexas,
conditions,
eles
atmospheric
talvez tenham
conditions that are
até
more
que
complex,
desligar, né,
we might need
enfim,
to
reduzir as
close
emissões. Tá? E aí, com isso,
and
a
reduce
gente
the
consegue ter
emissions. And with
planejamento
this, we can
estratégico
have
nessa
a
parte de redução,
strategic plan
remoção
with
dessas
reduction, remotion.
informações todas. Bom, aqui é a equipe, contato e muito obrigada. Aqui eu coloquei algumas
Thank you.
outras análises e já estou saindo. Ai, desculpa, tentei ser bem rápido. Acho que não falei nada, né?
Obrigada.
Obrigada.
Obrigada, professora Rita. Agradecemos todos os
Professor.
palestrantes
I would like to thank you
pelas
all for your
apresentações
presentations.
interessantes. E agora a
And
professora
now,
Judite
Professor
vai
Judith
apresentar, vai fazer o
is
debate.
going to open the table for a debate.
Bom dia a todos. Obrigada,
Good morning.
Perla, por
Thank you
conduzir aqui as apresentações.
for
Eu vou pedir,
conducting
então,
the
para os
presentations.
palestrantes
I would
comporem a
like
mesa aqui para a gente
everyone to
poder
compose the
conversar
table
pouco
for us
ainda sobre
to talk a bit
atividades
about
de qualidade
activities
do ar no Brasil.
on quality of the air in Brazil.
Temos 2 microfones aí que podem compartilhar e tem
We have
água
2
também,
mics you
podem
can
tomar
share.
para vocês, tá? Não, aí tem um para cada um, no mínimo. Ok, como é que tira agora aqui essa tela? Peraí. Escape. Ok. Bom, queria agradecer a todos os
I would like to
palestrantes,
thank
né,
you all
apresentando excelentes trabalhos e estudos
bringing
sobre a qualidade do
excellent
ar no
works
Brasil.
on quality
É
of
muito
the air in Brazil.
gratificante,
It
assim, ver como é que
is
vocês estão evoluindo os
amazing to
trabalhos, né,
see
no
how
contexto
we
de
are
NCP
evolving
País e,
in
sobretudo,
the
numa sub-rede que também
project,
que eu também
mostly
participo,
with
né, e
a
também é a área
sub-network
de
that I am
pesquisa, né? É
in,
muito bom de
and
ver
is
os
my research
avanços.
area. It's nice to see the
Eu
advances.
vou abrir para
I
perguntas já
would
já.
open
Eu
to
queria
questions. I
responder
would
duas
like to
coisas rapidinho que
answer 2
surgiram
things that
nas
came up
apresentações.
during the presentations.
Primeiro é sobre os sensores de baixo custo, né? A
Firstly,
gente vai ter toda
on
uma
low-cost
sessão sobre
resources, we're
sensores de
going to
baixo
have
custo, logo em seguida
a
um
whole
coffee break
session
agora, aqui nessa
with
sala também, onde o
about
Jean Tavares vai
low-cost
apresentar
sensors,
os planos para Natal e mais
where we're
sobre essas
going to
medidas que você
present
mostrou,
these
Tassiana.
plans
Eu só
on the
queria
measures that
complementar
we
essas medidas que você
shared. These
mostrou. É claro
measures
que a
that
gente
you
vai achar
showed,
material particulado
of
bem
course,
baixo
we're
em
going to
Natal.
find
A
particulate,
princípio,
very low
mas
particulate
sobretudo essas medidas,
PMs.
elas foram medidas
Mostly these
testes
measures
tiradas num
were
bairro bem próximo
tests
da praia
based
e
on a
não na
very low
superfície, não sei
and not on
quanto
the
andar,
surface.
do
I don't
terceiro
know
andar.
if it
Foi só
was
para fazer os primeiros testes,
just to do
tá?
the first
Mas aí
tests,
o ar vai estar muito limpo mesmo,
and
só
the air
vai
is
ter
going
essa
to be very clean.
validez, né?
Maybe we're going to have
Mas se a
some
gente medir em outros pontos, sobretudo
salt
ao
from the sea,
oeste
but
das principais
if we measure
rodovias, né, BR-101 que
everything,
passa
and in the
ali em Natal,
BR's
aí com
101
certeza a gente
that
vai
goes
pegar
through
pouco
Natal,
mais
we're going to have
2.5, né? E
more,
isso
maybe.
está, no momento, já
And
estamos
at
fazendo
this
essas medidas
moment,
e eu
we are
creio que
doing
Jean
these
vai mostrar
measurements,
alguns
and I believe
resultados de outros
Jen
sites
is
já,
going to
tá?
show results from
Aí
another
sobre as cidades que têm esse experimento
place.
segundo grau, eu
So
fiquei encantada de ver todos
for the
esses nomes
cities
aí.
that
Eles estão
have
realmente
this,
confirmados?
was amazing to see these names. They are
Uau,
confirmed.
que legal!
Are they?
Muito
Okay.
bom, porque a gente tem Natal
So
também
it's
tem em
nice. We
Fortaleza
are
também, já
in
podemos
Natal and we have in
acrescentar. Depois
Fortaleza
a
as well.
gente, eu acho
You
que a
can
gente
add.
tem que achar um
I
momentinho,
believe we need
Tassi, a gente
to
sentar e conversar e nos
find
atualizar uma
a
hora.
moment to update.
Parece que estamos na mesma página.
Judite, só para falar que esse
Sim.
grupo foi feito para
Just to
agora
say
na
that this
chuva,
group
né? Para
was
tentar
done
coletar a primeira chuva
for
depois
to
desse,
try to
dessa
collect the
escassez, né?
first rain after
E
the
as queimadas
scarcity,
também. Então a gente coletou, a Rita
the
está
fires as well. So we collected. Rita is analyzing
Alegre. Então a ideia,
Porto
e aí
Alegre.
eu propus, gente,
So
vamos
this
então
is the
fazer
idea.
PM2,5
So
no
let's
próximo ano, todo
do
mundo.
2.5 for
Que
next year,
legal. Tá
everyone.
perfeito, perfeito.
Okay.
Tá bom, então acho que vamos juntar algumas
So
perguntas do
let's
público
gather
agora e
some
depois passar para vocês
questions from
responderem.
the
Talvez juntar mais 3 perguntas. Quem tem
audience.
comentários, perguntas, temos um microfone para...
We have a mic here.
Em primeiro lugar, queria agradecer as
Firstly, I would
apresentações, que
like
é interessante de
to
ver a evolução
show the
de
presentations.
quando o
It's
Climapolis começou,
interesting to
principalmente com a
see
integração de vários grupos
from
trabalhando,
where Climapolis
juntos.
began talking with these
Queria
groups.
saber o quanto,
I would
talvez a
like
Fátima
to
possa
know, maybe Fatima
comentar
can
depois, o
help,
quanto as atividades,
how much these
tanto da parte
activities,
observacional, quanto da
both
parte de
in the
previsão,
observation part and provision,
a qualidade do ar,
for the
estão
quality
já,
of the air
ou
are,
poderiam, na visão de
or
vocês, estar
could be, in
integradas
your vision, being
dentro
integrated
das
within
atividades da
the
organização
activities of the
meteorologia.
organization.
Há 2 anos atrás,
2 years ago,
foi aprovado o GAFIS, né,
we
Global
approved
Air Quality Forecasting
GAFIS
Information System, que
and the
vai ser uma
forecasting
plataforma
system,
para disponibilizar os sistemas de previsão de qualidade do ar, também tendo em
and it's
consideração
going to be
as
take care
observações.
of the quality of the air,
A falta de
taking
observações,
in
e, ou
account the
seja,
lack of
quando você apresenta um
observations,
mapa,
and
fala,
when you
opa,
present
o
a
Brasil
map,
tá ali, eu não tenho. Por
but
quê?
if we're not there, why?
Porque não está disponibilizando. O dado às vezes existe, mas não está no
The
padrão
data is there, but it's
exigido
not in the
internacionalmente.
pattern.
Eu acho que é interessante ter essa discussão para que se coloque essas
Maybe
atividades no
it's
mapa
interesting to add this
pelos
on the
padrões que
map.
são desenvolvidos dentro da
We have some
organização
partners that are
mundial
developed
para essas
within
atividades que
the
vêm desde a parte de pesquisa
activities that
até
are
serviços.
from the
Então, acho que isso seria
research to
bastante
services,
importante.
and that would be
Eles
very
têm a Fátima
important.
como dentro do
And we
grupo,
have
né, aqui,
Fatima
pra fazer
within the
isso.
group to bring here.
Depois vocês complementam, mas o que eu vejo
I would like to
até
bring something, and you can complement what I see.
apresentação, né? Assim, os resultados, né? Fiquei até
Congratulations
impressionada.
on the
Vê tanta coisa
presentation.
realmente.
It's a lot of things here
Eu
going on.
vejo, eu acho que tem problema. Sim,
What
é
I
óbvio, todo
see
mundo já
is a
mencionou,
problem
são
that we
artigos
have,
também, todos os
and
artigos
we
fazem revisão
saw
disso,
in all these
são as
articles that
emissões.
have this,
Eu acho que não há problema
it's
nenhum
on
em se
emissions.
mostrar
There's no
todos os
problem
resultados e a modelagem.
talking about
Tem
modeling and
ponto
the results.
importante, o
But one thing
ozônio,
that is
né?
important,
Em geral,
ozone in
os
general,
trabalhos mostram que tem uma boa
this
representatividade
works
particular do grupo, né?
shows that we have an
E
activity,
isso, para mim,
specific
por conta
activity,
das
but for me
emissões.
is
Eu acho que
in
tem
regards
que
of
incluir
emissions. We have to
o
include
trabalho lá, ele está por aqui também, né? Que está
in
fazendo a
our
questão de
work
levantamento das fontes,
and
né? Não só
raising
as
the
veiculares.
sources, not
Acho que tem que melhorar
only
pouco a
vehicular,
questão
but
das
we need
emissões,
to
o trabalho do
improve
Leonardo, a questão
emissions, the work of
veicular
Leonardo with
e a questão das outras
vehicles
fontes, porque senão a
and
gente não
other
representa.
sources, because
Quando
if not, we don't
todas
represent
as simulações que a gente
every
vê dos
simulations
alunos,
we
tem
see
aquela
from the
questão, você usa os
students,
inventários globais
and
e
you
aí
can
não
use
vai,
the global
mas vê que
inventories
realmente
and we never
não
get
chega lá, né?
there.
E eu acho que é porque, por exemplo, quando você
So I
olha,
think that
é até um
is
trabalho que o
because when
Leonardo está
we
fazendo,
look at,
ele não
and
está
it's a
aqui,
work
está
that
no
Leonardo is
Peru,
doing,
mas
he's in
ele fez
Peru,
todo um ajuste de
but
emissões
he
que ficou
did
muito
an
melhor
adjustment of
nas
emissions, and it's
simulações que
much
estão
better
lá.
in the
É
last
interessante
simulations
ver.
that
O que
we
ele
did.
fez? Ele incorporou uma
And what he
especiação
did, we incorporated a
experimental, que levantou
specification,
tudo que
experimental.
existe, e aí fez
He
umas correções para os totais de
raised
emissão.
all the
Então,
information,
tem uma
total of,
superestimativa dos
we
inventários
have a
globais para emissão
superestimative
industrial,
on the
até
industrial
a questão da
emission
localização das
and
fontes. Então, tem
localization of
problema que a gente precisa
sources. We have
resolver
problem that we need to
básico, que é
solve,
tentar melhorar, ou
basic,
fazer um
that is try to
escalonamento, alguma
improve,
forma de
and
melhorar para poder
scaling
representar
and
melhor o material
improving
particular.
to
Acho que é só
represent
isso, do ponto de vista de
the
conseguir
material in a
fazer
better way,
e
in the sense of
rodar e, né,
being able
rodando
to
as
do
máquinas, até isso
or
acho que é possível.
gathering.
Mas eu acho que o problema
Maybe
maior é
that is
conseguir
even
representar
possible to
bem, um
have,
pouco
but
melhor, não bem, né, mas um pouco
improving
melhor as emissões que a gente tem,
a bit
que é o que
better
falta, né? E não
what we
falta
have in
só
regards of
no
emissions. And
norte,
it's not
nordeste,
only
falta
north,
aqui no
northeast.
sudeste, no sul. Se você
We're
faz uma
in
comparação
shortage of
total de
that
emissão
everywhere.
que vem dos,
If we
né, de vários
compare the
inventários globais,
emissions
não precisa ser
coming
só
from
do
different,
Eclipse, Edgar, todos aqueles que
it's not
você vai ver que tem uma diferença
only
grande.
one.
Essa
We
é uma
have a
revisão que a gente
huge
precisava
difference. This
fazer.
is something
E tem
that
o
we
trabalho do
should
pessoal
do.
do Chile, né, que
And we
fez
have
essa
the
revisão dos
Chilean
inventários.
team
Eles mostram como é
doing
diferente para o
the
Chile, como é
inventories,
diferente
and
para
it's
a
different in
Argentina,
Chile,
como é
in
diferente no
Argentina,
Brasil. Se a gente não melhorar, a gente
and
não vai
then
conseguir representar bem. Especialmente o PM2,5, né, que é bem complicado, né? Acho que é por aí um pouco, eu penso, não sei. Acho que vocês poderiam complementar.
and maybe you can complement.
Então, assim, acho que pelo que o Nico está falando também se
So
falta
for
uma
what we've been
integração
doing,
nacional, né? Também de
there's an
todos
integration
os dados.
lacking
Acho que
with all the
foi
data.
o Anderson que
I believe
falou, né,
that
sobre
Anderson
e
was
Tassiana
talking
também sobre a
about
falta de
Tassiana as
integração,
well
assim,
on the
o
lack of
IEMA tem um
integration.
conjunto de dados,
IEMA
mas
has
depois
a
você vai
gathering
ver
of
outra
data,
base de dados
and
que é
then we're
mais
going to see another
avançada, né? É muito pouco
database, and we're having some
transparente, né?
other
Isso para
website,
as
and
emissões também.
it's not enough transparent. So, and this works for emissions as well.
Do Espírito Santo.
Eu acho que o Leonardo, ele
I believe that
o
Leonardo,
IEMA, uma org, né? Uma ONG. É no Ministério do Meio Ambiente.
sim,
O problema é que
and
eles não
the
divulgam
Ministry
os
of
dados, né?
Environment,
Então, eles
the problem is that they
escondem, e
don't
aí a
share
gente
the
tem que ir
data, they
atrás de quem
hide,
mostra o dado.
and then
Aí
you
não é
have,
na ONG
we
mesmo.
have to go after them.
Sim, sim. Que
So,
libera, é isso.
eu acho que o
Agora,
Leonardo pode
I believe that
contribuir.
Leonardo
Desculpa,
can
Marcela,
contribute.
Leonardo, acho que pode contribuir para
Leonardo can
sobre falar um pouco
contribute
sobre
with
essa
this and
integração,
talk
né, com
about
o
this
seu projeto
integration
do
with the
MMA.
project.
Ups.
Desculpa, pessoal. Primeiramente, parabéns pelas apresentações, né? Conseguiram unir várias coisas.
Congratulations, we're able to
Cada
gather
grupo de pesquisa tem
a lot
feito
of things that
isoladamente,
every
e
group
aí a gente
was
está nesse
doing,
momento de
isolating, and we're in this
sensacional.
moment that
Não
is
pela
so
parte que a
incredible.
Tassiana apresentou minha foto ali,
And
eu não tinha cabelo branco ainda, mas ficou
I
muito
didn't
legal.
have
Bom, sobre a experiência com o projeto do Ministério, né? A gente teve que
And
fazer
with this
esforço enorme
ministry,
com
we had
todos
to
os
do
estados, entrando em
and
contato com cada uma das OEMAs, perguntando
taking,
sobre os
being,
dados, e
talking
uns
with
enviavam de
every
um jeito,
OEMA, and
outros de outro, outros não queriam usar o modelo
they
recomendado
didn't
por
want to
nós, porque
use
já
the
fazia
recommended
longo prazo,
template
então a gente teve que ir
recommended by
adaptando
us because it was long
muitas
term, so we have
informações
to adapt
inconsistentes no
everything, a lot
formulário
of
que o
inconsistent
Ministério
information,
pediu para que os órgãos
and
ambientais
the ministry asked,
verificassem. Então, é um
and they
trabalho extenso,
requested
assim.
from the organs to
Isso revela muito
represent,
a
and this reveal
nossa falta de harmonia, né? Que
and
cada tem feito de um jeito, não bota lá na plataforma do jeito que é e não
we
se
didn't
comunica com
have
o
this in the
Ministério.
platform,
E eu
and
acho
they
que daí,
don't
pensando desde
connect
no
to
Instituto,
the ministry,
talvez
and
seria essa uma oportunidade
this
que a
would be
gente
an opportunity for
procurar
us
sentar com os
to,
órgãos ambientais e buscar uma harmonia
with the
e
environmental
fazer uma
organs,
plataforma
having an
unificada,
harmony and
fortalecendo
unifying,
né, enfim, o
strengthening
próprio Ministério,
the
para que eles
ministry
fizessem papel, até o
for
próprio
it
IBAMA,
to
para que
be
eles
able,
fizessem
even
papel
IBAMA,
de
to
forma análoga
perform a
como foi nos
role that
Estados Unidos,
is
onde a EPA, né,
where
faz com que
like
todos os
is
órgãos
done in the
ambientais, todos os
US,
órgãos
because
ambientais do
NPA
país
and every
bebam da mesma
environmental
água, né,
organs drink from the same
façam isso de
water,
acordo com os protocolos
and
que vocês
they
recomendam.
then can use the
Eu acho que a gente
protocols that
pode
are
dar
recommended.
esse norte para
So we
eles.
can give this
Além
north
disso,
to
né, tem
them.
essa discussão sobre o que a gente
So
tem feito
also we
como
have the
coleta de dados.
discussion
Então, as
as
iniciativas,
data
né,
collection and the
órgãos que são
initiatives
extremamente
in organs that
consolidados
are
aqui em São Paulo,
extremely
Rio de Janeiro,
consolidated in São
tem
Paulo, Rio
estações
de
de
Janeiro,
referência que cobrem quase
and
o
reference
território inteiro do
stations
estado, né?
that work on the whole
Mas
territory
tem
of the state.
algumas iniciativas
But
que é
some
quase na ação do
initiatives,
desespero, né, como a gente
even
faz em Santa Catarina,
as
e
desperate
hoje, né,
as we do
bravamente, o
in
pessoal
Santa
no
Catarina,
norte, né,
bravely
no
people from the
nordeste também tem
north and
feito com os
northeast
sensores
have
indicativos.
done with
Mas o que a
indicative
gente quer saber é
sensors.
ter informação
What we
sobre
want to
qualidade do ar, né?
know
Não, então
is
a gente
having
usa a
information
plataforma,
qualitative
então
there so
usa
we can use the
produto
platform,
satélite.
and
Acho
satellite
sensacional, né?
products
Mas o
is
produto satélite que a
sensational.
gente usa dos
But
Estados
the
Unidos, ou sei
satellite
lá, o
product that
produto
we
do
use is
Merra,
from the United
né?
States
Merra 2, ou então o CAMS.
or
Daí deu
comes.
aquela discussão enorme com o
And we
pessoal
have
do
the
Ministério da Saúde,
discussion
porque o
with the
pessoal não ficou
Ministry of
satisfeito, mas eu
Health,
achei
and
louvável a atitude
they
deles
weren't satisfied,
em pelo menos
but
se expor e tentar propor algo com
their
informação que
actions,
ninguém
their
tinha.
activity was interesting,
Pelo menos
and
é um
to
começo. Está
propose
errado,
something that
vamos
was
melhorar,
interesting.
né?
It is
Então, por que
wrong.
que a gente
Let's
aqui,
improve.
talvez, né, como
So why
objetivo do
us, as
próprio
a
projeto,
goal
fazer produto de
of the
reanálise
project, to do
nosso,
a
considerando
product,
todas as observações que temos, o
considering
nosso
all the
conhecimento
observations
sobre
that we
poluição do
have,
ar,
the knowledge on
e muito bem
contamination,
colocado, né, que os produtos
and
hoje a
very
gente vê
well
o Campos, a
put,
gente vê
the
uma
products that we
superestimativa
see,
gigante nas
canvas, we
áreas onde
have
tem queimadas,
huge
né, que
estimatives
de
in the
fato
areas
se
where we
mede o
have
nível da superfície, a gente não
fires,
está
and when we
prevendo
measure the
bem.
surface,
Então,
we're
quem
not
sabe essa
reviewing
seja uma
properly.
temática muito
Maybe
importante, eu não sei,
this
daí
is
pergunta para a mesa,
something
né?
that is very
Vocês acham
interesting,
que vale a
important.
pena a gente fazer
Do you
produto
think
de
it's
reanálise,
worth
unir aqui,
doing a
fazer
product,
e
a
prover os
reanalysis
dados numa
product, and
plataforma comum,
offer the
que
data
todo mundo
in
saiba,
a
comece
common
a usar e
platform that
fidelizar isso?
everyone can use
Obrigada.
this?
Eu vou então passar
Thank you.
a palavra aqui para a mesa.
I will
Né?
give the
A
floor
gente
to
tem
the
que fechar
table.
até às 10 horas.
We
A
have to
Pérola pediu para
close.
ficar dentro do tempo. Eu acho que eu vou passar para
I
cada
will
um
give
fazer
for everyone
alguns comentários finais aí para a
to
gente encerrar a
say
mesa. Depois
some
podemos migrar o
closing
debate
words,
para
and
a área
then we
do
can
coffee break, talvez.
migrate the debate for the coffee break area.
Daniela, será que ela pode fazer uma pergunta?
Ah, pode, eu não vi, desculpe. Então vamos fazer uma última pergunta e depois
Last
os comentários
question, and then
Desculpe, Daniela. Que bom que você viu, Tassiana.
Bom dia a todos. Muito obrigada pelas
good
palestras. Eu sou
morning.
Daniela,
Thank you.
coordenadora de uso do solo na
I
Secretaria
coordinate the
de
usage
Licenciamento e
of
Urbanismo em São Paulo.
soil
E, bom, muito
in São
por causa da
Paulo.
minha função, a gente se vê obrigado a pensar de forma
I
prática
think in a very
e na
practical way
ação.
and in action.
Vejo que os dados
I
estão
see that the
ainda
data
desconexos,
are
eles ficam mais na academia, não
disconnected, they
estão
are in the
conversados.
academia, not standardized.
Entretanto, seria muito bom que a gente tivesse eles
However, it
padronizados.
would
O
be
esforço para
interesting
ter
to
eles numa
have them
plataforma única e que todos
standardized
usem a
and
mesma
having it in
linguagem,
an
acho
unique platform
fenomenal.
and
Porém,
using the
gostaria
language.
de
It's
vocês
amazing.
mais
But I
uma
would like to know,
dúvida,
as
uma
a doubt,
curiosidade e aí
curiosity,
uma talvez uma
And
possibilidade
a possibility,
existe alguma legislação
is there
que
any
obrigue ou que
legislation
formate essa
that
padronização dos dados? E se não
demand
existe,
the
será que não
standardization
seria o
of data?
caso
And if
para vários
not,
acadêmicos promoverem
even the academia to
essa legislação
promote
que possa
this
unificar? Porque, assim,
legislation to
ótimos
unify.
esforços, a gente faz a plataforma
Of
única, mas fazer
course,
todos fazerem a
we have
plataforma
to
única e
do the
ouvirem e
unique
verem.
platform and listen and
Talvez a
see.
legislação ela
Maybe
seja mais
legislation
contundente, e aí você passa
is
por essa
more
obrigação. E
contundent,
aí
and we have this obligation. And going to the legislation sphere, federal maybe, and go through the municipalities and door by door, talking about this and standardize and ask for this legislation.
Obrigada.
Quem quer responder primeiro?
Eu acho que a frase dela corrobora com a resposta aqui para o
I
Leonardo,
believe
né?
is together with the
Realmente, não
response that
adianta a gente
Leonardo
se
gave.
esforçar,
It's
a gente não
not
vai ter
worth it to
pernas, né? O
effort.
Brasil
We
inteiro
won't have
teria, né, todos os órgãos
strength
e
to
as
do that.
empresas
All the
que deveriam se
organs and the
adequar. E, de
companies that
fato,
should
a
adequate.
única forma de
And the only
obrigar é
way of
através de uma
forcing
legislação.
is
Então, eu
through
acho que
legislation.
talvez o pontapé inicial e até
Maybe,
com a fala da Fátima também, que o nosso
and
problema,
together
tudo
what
bem, a gente tem um
Fatima
problema
said,
com a lei
our
do ar,
problem, we
dos
have a
dados,
problem
mas
with
um problema
data,
muito maior
but
sobre as
it's a larger
emissões,
problem
né?
on
E
emissions.
aí vai impactar nas
And it's going
modelagens,
to
nas
impact
decisões, nos
modeling,
controles, etc.
decisions,
Então,
controls.
assim, eu acho que é uma pergunta, eu acho que o
So
pontapé inicial talvez seria
this
essa
is something that
para a questão da legislação,
would be
focar
with
na
legislation,
melhoria da representatividade das
focus
emissões
on the
e
improvement
sim
and
ter uma
representativity of
plataforma. Eu acho que são três
emissions.
coisas que podem andar em paralelo, né? Mas a gente precisa realmente de pessoas voluntárias, porque, né, não existe dinheiro, não existe projeto para bancar esse sistema para rodar. Ou projetos em paralelos, que é o que a gente vem
Or
fazendo, né?
parallel that
Projetos
we've
da
been doing.
Fátima, que já tem dinheiro para alguma coisa, a gente faz, o meu, enfim, são unir os esforços, mas eu acho que talvez com a articulação do INCT
And maybe
e
the
com
articulation
o
of
projeto do Ministério do Meio Ambiente,
NCT
talvez
and
a
the
gente tenha
project with
agora
the Ministry of Environment,
uma força maior para tentar
maybe we have
forçar que as
a
empresas se
larger
autodeclarem naquele
strength for
formato, para que
companies
a
to
gente consiga,
auto-declare
pelo menos, minimizar
themselves
o problema.
to minimize the problem.
Anderson?
Bom, com relação às observações, né?
On regards
O
of
que eu digo é que a política
observations, what I
nacional da
say is that
qualidade do
the
ar
national
prevê que os dados eles
politics
devem
of
ser
and
unificados
review
e
and the data needs
padronizados de
to
uma
be
forma
unified
que a
and
gente consiga
standardized
dar um pontapé
in a
inicial.
way
É
that we
lógico que,
can work
como a
on at the
política saiu
beginning.
esse ano
Of
ainda em
course,
maio,
because the
espera-se que ainda leve um tempo, os estados ainda tenham
policy just
planos, né, para
begun
gerar os
and the
seus planos de
states to
gestão de
have
qualidade do
the
ar. Então, assim,
management
é lógico que é
plans.
importante a gente
Of
começar a
course,
dar
it
esse
is
pontapé inicial,
important
começar a pensar
with
na
this
padronização desses dados,
begin
mas
to
acho que ainda
talk
vai
about
levar
the
um certo tempo
standardization
para que a
of
gente
this, and
consiga
it's going to
ajustar
take a bit
isso,
of
pensando a longo
time
prazo, né?
to thinking in long
Parênteses,
term.
que eu acabei de me lembrar que o projeto que o Leonardo está
The
coordenando,
project that
que também acabou
Leonardo
de
is
iniciar,
talking
ele
about,
está
that just
prevendo, o Ministério
initiated, is
solicitou que no
talking,
projeto
the ministry
a gente
required that in
desenhe
the
qual seria
project
essa
for us to
padronização, né,
design the
esse formato.
standardization.
Então, tá aí na fila. Talvez não precise de uma nova lei, né?
Maybe won't need a new law.
Então, o Estado, se ele não quiser fazer, ele não é obrigado. Ele pode colocar em plataforma própria. A ideal seria ter redundância. O Estado fazer, mas também integrar. Porque quando o Paulo falou no problema de qualidade do ar que a gente teve com as queimadas, monitorar, que era o Ministério do Ar. A gente não tinha informação.
Então precisa de mais
So we
especificações
need more
na lei regulamentar que
specifications
saiu agora dia 2 de
in
maio,
the rule that
precisaria mais
came
regras,
up.
né?
We would need more
Como
rules
exatamente esses
on how
dados devem ser
this data need to
disponibilizados, né?
be available.
Então, mas é bom, já tem gente
But
trabalhando
it's
nisso, em
good. We have
conjunto com o
people working this
Ministério, né, do
together with the
Meio
Ministry of
Ambiente, então
Environment.
já está indo numa direção
So
boa, né? Eu
it's going
gostaria
towards
agora, a
something
gente tem,
good. I would like
desculpa,
to,
Tassiano, mas a gente tem que fazer as considerações
we have to
finais agora
close.
da mesa para a gente encerrar. Depois podemos continuar conversando.
Then we can
Eu acho que eu vou
continue.
aqui começar pelo Newton
Newton?
e vamos aqui pela Rita, se ela quiser.
Pode ser por mim, então.
Tem que ser no microfone, por favor, por causa da transmissão.
Então, Eu acho que foi muito
I
legal
believe
esse debate que a gente fez
this
aqui.
debate
Foi
was
maravilhoso,
very
mas a
nice,
gente fica se
wonderful,
preocupando com a
and
qualidade do ar,
we
enquanto
are
que a
concerned
gente não
about the
tinha nem
quality
dados
of the air, and we don't
meteorológicos,
even
né?
have
As
meteorological data.
estações caóticas,
The
tudo capenga, tá um
stations,
caos geral esse
it's a
Brasil, tá um horror.
chaos.
E como que a gente vai trabalhar,
And
fazer
how are we going
modelagem
to
sem
work
ter o
and do
básico
modeling
do
without
básico? Sem o
having the
básico do básico, a
basics?
gente não vai conseguir, né,
Without
resultado
it, we won't
maravilhoso.
have the
Por que eu
wonderful
faço esses
results.
experimentos? Porque
Why do I do these
surgiu uma
experiments?
conversa
Because we had a
e era uma conversa
conversation,
mesmo, que Candiota
and
era
it
o
was a
pior lugar do
conversation
mundo em relação às emissões de
that
gases de
we
efeito
had the
estufa.
worst place in the
Eu e a
world
Fátima,
for
desde 93,
greenhouse effect
90 e
gases.
pouquinho, né, Fátima?
Since
Começamos os
90
estudos,
something, we
depois,
begun the studies.
na época, a chaminé tinha 150
At the
metros, nós
time, we
fizemos
had
todo um
150
monitoramento, lindo, maravilhoso. Agora, aquelas
meters high.
frentes antigas foram todas
These former
reorganizadas e tal,
places were
melhorou muito a
organized,
área,
and we
melhorou mesmo.
improved the area
Assim,
a
vamos
lot.
fazer um trabalho mais
And let's
robusto.
do
Esse trabalho que a gente
a more
fez para
robust
medir esses
work
gases de efeito estufa,
to
essas coisas, foi
measure
uma
the
coisa
work we done.
localizada. Quando tu pega uma
This
coisa
needs to be
localizada,
localized when we
comparando um
have
projeto
this
bem,
and compare the project
enfim, naquele determinado ponto a gente tem
in that
resultados legais,
specific
dados
place. We have
importantes, consegue
results
fazer modelagem
with
e
data that
etc.
we are able to
Agora,
do
a nível de
modeling,
Brasil, é
but
super
in terms
desafio
of
fazer.
Brazil, it's
Desafio
a
demais,
huge
porque o IBAMA,
challenge
eles têm todo
because
inventário
IBAMA
tanto
has
de
an
emissões, porque
inventory
eles são
both
obrigados
for
a ter,
emissions
quanto de qualidade do ar, porque toda a
and quality
rede
of the air because
interligada
all the
ao IBAMA.
network is
Por exemplo, lá em
interlinked
Candiota
to
tem 5
IBAMA.
estações
In
de
Candiota, we
qualidade
have
do ar
5
daquelas convencionais.
stations.
Todas elas estão integradas
All
com o
of
IBAMA,
them
e o
are
IBAMA tem
integrated
essas
with IBAMA,
informações.
and IBAMA
E tem
has
as
this
informações
information
contínuas do que está
and
saindo da
has the
chaminé,
continuous
tanto de
information
Candiota
on what
quanto
is
dessas
coming out
outras
of
usinas
the
termoelétricas e
chimney.
empreendimentos. Os órgãos estaduais têm que ter isso
The
também. Eu
state
acho que
organs needs
a
to
gente
have that as well.
teria que ter um protocolo, né, onde
We
esse
should have a
chegasse com um
protocol
documento oficial e dissesse, olha, isso
to
aqui
bring a
é super importante,
document,
vocês têm
and
que
this
nos
is
dar
very
essas
important. You
informações,
need to
porque o
bring
nosso
this
trabalho é um
information
trabalho
because
que
our
conta
work
e que a gente só
is
quer melhorar, né, e
something
ajudar.
that we need to improve and help.
Mas, enfim, precisamos tanto da qualidade do ar
We need the
quanto
quality of
dos
the air
dados
and
meteorológicos, não
the
só de
meteorological
superfície
data,
quanto de ar
not
superior.
only
E se a gente
surface,
não tem,
but
tem que fazer
superior. We
experimento
don't
com
have
doenças
that. We need
ambientais
to
em
have
áreas onde são
experiments
mais
in
degradadas e etc.
areas
Acho que é mais ou
where
menos
they're more
isso.
degraded.
Obrigada, Rita. Vamos passar para o Newton. Então, agora eu só, antes, Newton, de você começar, só queria apresentar a Rita como
I would
mais
like to
recente
present
membro
Rita
do INCT
as the
Climapolis, né?
most recent
A
member
Fátima e eu
of
conversamos com ela no
ENCT
CEPAM.
Climapolis.
E, enfim, para quem ainda não conhece,
For those who
é a
don't know
Rita.
her,
Os outros conhecem, não, mas só para formalizar aqui.
just to
Newton.
formalize.
Na verdade, vou trazer minha consideração final um pouco alinhado com a
I'm
questão
going
que
to bring my
que a Fátima
last
levantou.
words
Um dos
talking
grandes
about
desafios
what
desse maior
Fatima
desafio
brought.
seja as
One of the
emissões, né?
biggest challenge
Assim,
are emissions.
aí que eu acho que
So this
essa
is
necessidade de juntar esse
how we
esforço
have the need
entre
to
comunidades de
gather
qualidade
this
do ar e
effort
comunidades mais
between the
focadas
quality
a
on
estudos
the
climáticos é
more
extremamente
focused
importante,
on
porque a gente precisa
climate studies.
confrontar
It's something
essa
important
dificuldade
because
das
you have to
emissões
face the
do ponto de
difficulties
vista
of emissions
observacional. E do ponto de
in
vista
the point of
climático, a gente
view
tem
of
indicadores
observations.
assim
And in this sense,
já
we have
bem
indicators
estabelecidos
well
que ajudaria nesse
established that
sentido.
are going to help in this
Por exemplo, eu
sense.
acho que é um dos levantamentos que o
So
artigo de
this
revisão
is one
mostra
of the information
que
that we
desses
have in
estudos
the
de qualidade do ar,
work and the studies of
medem os
quality of
efeitos
the air.
climáticos, poucos
We
exploram
have
esse efeito
very
climático.
few that
E, no geral, a
explore
comunidade de
this
qualidade do ar,
effect.
quando vai avaliar os
And
modelos, os
when we
resultados focam
assess
muito
the
nos
templates, the
dados
results
superfície.
focus a
Se
lot
a
in
gente
the
traz
surface
informações
results.
já
If you have
estabelecidas, consultadas
information,
para
they are
tentar
consecrated
fazer
to
esse
try
fechamento, a gente
to
começa
do this
a
closing.
estreitar essa
We
questão
start
das
to
emissões.
strengthening the
Porque
emissions.
desafio que eu vejo,
So
às vezes, é na
a
forma
challenge
como a
that I
gente avalia
see is the
os
way
nossos
we
resultados.
assess our
Eu tenho
results.
ciência de uma limitação que eu tenho no meu
I am
modelo.
aware of
E,
the
geralmente,
limitation that I
como que
have
eu
in a
espero
template,
que
and what do I
essa limitação eu
expect
introduza em termos de resultado final?
and
Eu tenho
as
uma
a
redução
end
na matéria
result.
particulada
So I
tal,
have a reduction on
estou
PM
subestimando essa fonte, não tem essa fonte.
because
Então,
I'm
talvez a gente pudesse
underestimating
também
the
trabalhar
source.
no
So
sentido
maybe
de
we will be
integrar
able to work in the sense of
parâmetros junto, até
integrating
uma
this
coisa que eu
information
conversei com o Adriano,
together with
no
something
artigo
that
que
I
foi
talked to
publicado,
with
a
Adriana,
gente olhar
to look at other indicators. explore, to close this challenge, and obviously work together. And how can we have a reanalysis local? It's fundamental. So this gets into a challenge that we have an historical quality of their assessment to see this in a very categorical way. We don't have that. And the effort to do this, but we know that we have a lot of difficulties. This is where we get the concentrated works, more complex, and the transition period. And we have the challenge, and we have a historical round, and we have a scenario that is influenced by the regional context. And this would help to establish a profile induced by the usage of the local limitations. We don't have a certainty in these periods that comes from regional, and we are not able to select this. This is why this effort on the climate community more related to effects and the quality of the air in the sense of assessment, even if we have an article based on this and effects that we have there. I believe the microclimate is interesting in this, somehow.
Bom, já está passando um pouco da hora do café. Vocês querem ainda fazer umas considerações finais? Vocês dois, algo a acrescentar, o que já disseram? Tá ok? Tá bom. Então, muito obrigada a vocês quatro. Obrigada,
Thank you.
também.
Thank you, Pérola.
Vamos ao coffee break.
Let's go to a coffee break.
Excelente a mesa. Parabéns. Bom, viu?
Chicotinho da Pérola e
Bom dia, pessoal. Vamos dar início aqui aos trabalhos. A mesa número 10 é sobre sensores de baixo custo, tá? Então, vou fazer uma leitura breve aqui do currículo aí dos palestrantes, tá? Para a gente dar início aí às apresentações. E, posterior às apresentações, a gente vai abrir aí a mesa para debates, tá? Então, a primeira palestrante aqui, a Leila Martins, da Universidade Federal do Paraná, tá? É doutora com ênfase em Química da Atmosfera, docente e coordenadora do programa PPGEA da Universidade Técnica Federal do Paraná, bolsista do CNPq e membro do INCT Climápolis. Temas de estudo, exposição e saúde, fontes e emissões atmosféricas, modelagem da qualidade do ar, ozônio troposférico, monitoramento ambiental e sensores de baixo custo. O outro palestrante é o Jean Tavares, do Instituto Federal de Ciência e Tecnologia do Rio Grande do Norte, é engenheiro civil, PhD na área de pesquisa em engenharia hidráulica e águas, pesquisador na área de meio ambiente da Universidade de Coimbra, em Portugal, em 2022, professor do Instituto Federal de Educação e Ciência e Tecnologia no Rio Grande do Norte. O outro palestrante, o Wilson Cabral, ele é oceanógrafo, mestre em sensoriamento remoto e doutor em economia, com pós-doutorado no Instituto de Energia e Ambiente da USP, e a Universidade de Sunshine Coast, na Austrália. É professor titular do ITA, atuando com temas de mudanças climáticas, soluções baseadas na natureza e inovação para a sustentabilidade. Então, podemos dar início às apresentações. A sequência, não sei se está na sequência dos nomes que eu li aqui, alguém, ou tem alguma sequência? Não precisa? Então, acho que pode ser a Leila, se quiser iniciar a apresentação, fique à vontade. Muito obrigado. Né?
Você coloca? Obrigada. Mais aqui, Leila. Cheia. Nossa, passa aqui ou passa aqui? Tá. Bom dia. Depois do café, todo mundo acordado. Vou falar um pouquinho para vocês, então, sobre os sensores de baixo custo, esses sistemas de sensores de baixo custo, algumas oportunidades e desafios, e também, mais ao final, alguns exemplos de atividades que a gente tem desenvolvido. Bom, a gente fala de sensor de baixo custo, né, e fala de sensor, então esse sensor é aquilo que observa e que faz a medida física de uma propriedade, e que vai converter isso a um sinal, né? Então, a gente normalmente chama esses dispositivos, né, que vão fazer essa medida de sensor, então sensor de baixo custo dessa forma. E essa questão do custo está muito associada ao preço, ao custo efetivo e ao sensor em si, né? Mas a gente sempre se refere ao sistema como um todo, né? Os sensores de baixo custo. Mas a gente acha, entende, né? Acredita que esses sensores a gente não pode simplesmente fazer essa definição apenas baseada no custo, mas também nas características dessa solução, além do custo propriamente, né? Então, aqui nessa... Vou deixar o pointer aqui, peraí... Aqui nessa imagem, aqui, vocês conseguem ver, então, o sistema, né, e aí o sensor propriamente ali, além dos outros itens que fazem parte, então, dos sensores de baixo custo. Bom, esses sensores de baixo custo, então, é colocado, isso já está nesse report que a Organização Mundial Meteorológica fez, agora em 2024, que é o terceiro relatório sobre os sensores de baixo custo, e eles são realmente colocados como uma ferramenta-chave para esse preenchimento de várias lacunas que existem, como já foi apontado aqui anteriormente, com relação especificamente aqui à qualidade do ar, mas não só a qualidade do ar, há uma série de outras variáveis ambientais, né? E aqui a gente pode ver, então, esse exemplo de o quão a gente é deficitário em termos de monitoramento da qualidade do ar. Então, esses sensores de baixo custo, esses sistemas de sensores de baixo custo, somado à internet das coisas, esse IoT, que é essa internet, esse paradigma de comunicação, né, dos objetos que a gente tem no dia a dia e que eles com o acoplamento, vamos dizer assim, dos sensores, a gente pode se utilizar para fazer monitoramento e para que, então, a gente possa ter cidades mais espertas, mais inteligentes, né? E ter esse monitoramento mais integrado para a questão de ter uma qualidade ambiental melhor. Bom, então, especificamente voltado à parte de qualidade do ar, né, com relação aos sensores de baixo custo, ele vai nos auxiliar a identificação dessas fontes, as emissões, a nos auxiliar a responder a essa principal questão em termos de contribuições dessas emissões ou dessas fontes para a qualidade do ar, e, claro, então, para o efeito à saúde e ao clima também, né? Então, como uma ferramenta aí auxiliar. Bom, então, no report de 2020, que é bastante interessante da Organização Mundial Meteorológica, eles fizeram uma revisão e uma inclusão, né, então, aí de entendimentos daquilo que havia na literatura sobre os sensores de baixo custo, para realmente fornecer uma compreensão melhor sobre esse uso e operação desses dispositivos de baixo custo. Então, esse é realmente um desafio, uma questão importante a ser considerada no uso desses sensores de baixo custo, que é justamente a qualidade, né, e uma série de outras variáveis ali que precisam ser consideradas quando se vai utilizar. Então, aqui o próprio report coloca, né, então, à medida que a gente tem aqui mais itens sendo avaliados, ou seja, fazendo uma comparação, depois uma colocação e a calibração propriamente dita, a gente tem um aumento da confiabilidade, da qualidade que esses dados vão nos fornecer por esses sensores de baixo custo. E o report, como eu já mencionei, de 2024, ele fez uma integração, né, desses sistemas de sensores de baixo custo, com o objetivo de discutir, né, o uso deles e, junto com outras fontes de dados, outras informações,
other source of data to take care of the sources and aspects of the quality of the air, and then bring some examples of the conjunct usage of this data for some case of studies. So specifically here, looking for the quality of the air. So the usage of the conventional studies and references and the sensors of low cost, indicatives, satellite, and this
avaliar a qualidade do ar. Então, ele serve para auxiliar para várias aplicações, então, para parte da qualidade do ar.
It works for several planning of the air, planning of the attributions, and justice, environmental, and education. So the most important analysis for this, it is important for several areas of challenge. It is low cost access, and in the following and existent in these problems and related to the quality of the air and the monitoring globally, and can be very useful in the sense of the usage of this technology. So some recommendations that are put in the report that is important to say in the experiments of these situations, and we're planning and using these low-cost sensors, and it's to have very clear the limitations in regards of the sensors and the low accuracy and specificity and the time of life, and when
qual é a finalidade desse dado, né? Definir as variáveis de
define the variables
modelo que existem aí,
and the templates and what we have available in the markets of the sensors. So we have several items, recommendations that are important, and it's important to be verified. And the matter of how it is going to be assessed when we have problems with the sensors, lack of data, if they're going to be instituted, fixed, and if they're going to be verified in a way of collocation or calibration. So this needs to be in the planning for us to be able to get to the final goal of what we want. Here I'm going to bring another example that are some developments that we've done together with the project that ended last year, and another one that is going on, mentioning the this development of this low-cost sensors. This is an example of a station that is quality of the air developed, and the sensor, low-cost sensor with the low-cost sensors, where we have the sensors, the plaque that was electronical that was developed to get the transmission, everything, the entrance of the air that is closed, and effectively the sensors that we use, and a bit of challenges in the construction of this station, because it's not just gathering pieces. We need to check, we need to program, we need to have the data, conversion of signal, and transmission of the data as well, that is central. So for us to assess the quality of this data related, developed by this station, we brought from a reference station. We had integration, that is one of the ways we recommend to assess, and next to the reference that we had in the USP, and together with the low-cost station, as we did the measurement for a certain period of time in 2023, and then as a way of treat and improve the quality of the data and results, we use some machine learning methods where we had around 80% of the data for training of the template, 10 for quality, and 10 for validation. Here we have some results here where we used, say, the random forestry, this was the template that was more adequate for this situation, where we have the treatment of this data with this template, and we are able to do the comparison, and after using the template with the data reference, and it improved a lot in reference of the data after applying this correction methodology. Another development that we did was, it's a monitor that is low-cost monitor for PM10 and 2.5, and this is where we have the architecture of the system that was developed in this year, and the paper for the students and the technological of Paraná University, and we find here the part of communication on the network server, application, how to visualize this data, and the platform. Likewise, we did referencing here. We use P1 and doing the comparison with some reference equipment and using different sensors with low cost. We have several on the market of these sensors, and here the PM as those used in Tupperware. This is what we have here, and here I added some information on the sensors, and we had this correction as well, applying these techniques in machine learning in the case of the forest as well. And here we have a comparison for PM10 of the reference versus the data of low-cost sensor. Here we have the training of what we have here, the box, the package, the system of the plaque, the sensor itself, the transmission part, and the option to use the battery, solar panel, and it's important to be installed.
We also made a bigger comparison. At first, we had a comparison there in Cascavel, in the state of Paraná, then in Vitória, using BAN as a reference. So in these graphs, it shows data that we can see this gross data that were measured, and in the red line, sorry, in red and blue, the values from the reference device. So we see the comparison between them. And what we show at first, this is the low correlation when we use the data, the gross data without any kind of treatment. And then here, applying the machine learning technique, better calibration, the result is much better when we compare the square R in relation to the results, the reference results, and that we used different methods in order to assess what was going to be better in order for this. The idea is to obtain, to have a model to calibrate. So you can apply this later to several other devices and do this correction. And then this model would be in the cloud. It is being fed as much as possible because we should have at least one reference station so it can be like a foundation for it. So just to mention some more examples, even though it's not about our quality, but I understand IMCT goes beyond the quality of air. We were talking about quality of air, but it is also the water quality. So we developed some things in this scope when it comes to water quality. And then some of the results, the main results that were published. At first, we found a gap about which sensors to use, which ones would be more appropriate, what is being used in the market, what the applications are for the water quality with these low-cost sensors. So we had a systematic review trying to answer these questions. What are these sensors that are being used for remote monitoring of the water? And then we found some results here for different countries. More countries in Asia that have been using more this kind of technology. The growing number of papers that were published on this, but few papers are assessed or have been assessing the accuracy of these sensors compared with reference devices, and there is no procedure or a protocol to do these measurements and for how long it should be done, calibration or checking. I think it's also when it comes to quality of air, there are some recommendations of IPA or the European agency when it comes to it. But for water, we don't have it. And then showing the architecture of the system, first prototype, a lake in Paraná. I'm not going into detail about it, but the prototype here in the sequence, we performed an assessment when we found this gap in literature of which sensors, and then we bought different sensors to assess water quality. We assessed 19 of them, comparing the variables, pH, oxygen turbidity, oxy reduction, and then we made a comparison with the reference, and then we made all the calculations in order to try to answer which sensors would be the best, or if they would have a tolerable failure. And then some conclusion, just to finish my presentation, is that these low-cost air quality and particular matter stations can be useful, as it is well documented in the report of the organization, Meteorological Organization 2024, and together with other tools to obtain this environmental data, they will help us to improve this monitoring, and we really need to think about this planning before installing this network of low-cost sensors, and it is recommended to use, the literature has said this, using these machine learning models to improve the accuracy of the results. And to close, more recently, we developed a station, an odor station for the treatment of gas, ammonia, H2S, SO2, BC, and it was recently installed together with a company there in Centelha, in Paraná. And maybe a reference station or something which is equivalent, so we can make the comparisons. Here you can see the photo that shows the system, all the sensors, the flow, net control of the flow, not to be something passive, but also with the flow. And here you can see this working with low-cost sensors and also low-cost station. This is included in an innovation project which is called Centelha in the state of Paraná. We have been working on this lastly, and the whole group has been working on it. Okay, so thank you. A few of the results that I presented is a project we have just concluded in VCT from the foundation, CNPq, the cooperation of some of the partners were here. So we were able to develop this work. Thank you very much, and I'm available for questions.
Então, pessoal, agora podemos chamar o nosso
Okay,
próximo.
so now we can invite the next presenter, Jean Tavares.
Pedirei que
I will ask you to use your 15 minutes so we don't get late here in the debate.
Bom dia a todos.
Good morning, everyone. It's a very important opportunity we have to present here our data from Natal. Here at our table, our team, people who work in our group on this experiment, real-world experiment in Natal, coordinated by, let me just know how to use this pointer. So coordinated by Professor Judite, the coordinator of INCT, Clima Policy in Natal. I am in charge of the group of the real-world experiment focused on low-cost sensors. Also, our members, the researchers, members from the community, representatives of the community, from the sanitary surveillance in the state, the State Environmental Vigilance, the School of Public Health, and also scientific initiation students. Here you can see the team. And the work is incipient. What I would like to highlight, it's because our achievement is to bring Natal to the map. It is the first time we present our data in congresses, data from our city. Professor Tassiana always highlighted this in her presentations. We are out of the map. In any of these platforms, we are not included. So our biggest achievement is to have already some data since September. We have been using these sensors, and I'm going to thank for those who helped us to get these sensors. Professor Judite brought these sensors for us, and now we are applying them and making all the appropriations we need to do. We had a problem with moisture. So this phase of the project is just to test the difficulties too. So these sensors we use for moisture, humidity, we are working with the data from the stations, climatologic stations, but this does not validate the data of the material. So here the description of our essential. Parallel to it, we have the concern with the calibration of the results and its validation. And we have these other three pieces of equipment, standard samplers to collect R, the sampler of total particles, PM10, they are under maintenance, so we can calibrate our data. This project is composed of three phases. The first one is already done when we install there the sensors in a neighborhood that is a little bit more protected, close to the university, Punta Negra. And then we are in stage 2, which is to deploy the sensors in the IFRN, the campus in Natal, close to 2 of the avenues, the biggest avenues in the city. So initially, we put them in an area close here to the court, and now it is being, it is at the entrance of the campus. This is part of the learning process as well, because we used the network, the Wi-Fi net from the institute to make this. And at this point here, the internet was not very good. So this is why we changed the sensor there. And next week, maybe this week, my student asked me to do so. We are going to bring it to this point because of the wind directions. We have these woods here, and the data that we are collected may be influenced by the woods. So we also want to collect here where the other equipment are to be calibrated. Here the location of the first point. We use this station initially, this structure that came with the sensor, and now it is at the main entrance. It's located at the main entrance of our institution, and here the graph showing that Natal is in the map of our air quality. Okay, it is a huge auditorium. I worked for long. I saw the question. A colleague from the City Hall, I had the same position of hers there in the City Hall of Natal. So when we have a structure such as São Paulo and very well developed studies such as the one that Professor Ever presented us, we see how much we can make progress, how much information can be shared, can be generated, and the beginning of the work is now. Collecting first data systematically, collecting it. So here you can see some data that were presented by Professor Tassiano. Sorry for the references that are not updated. I used the one from the norm, 491 norm, but in general, the quality for particulate material and P10, 2.5 is within parameters. It's a lower, actually, but I have to skip this part of my speech because Natal, different from the cities, Professor Rita, for example, there in Rio Grande do Sul, started their studies because there was this idea that the city you studied in was one of the most polluted in the world. Natal has the legend, let's say, that it is the purest air in the Americas, and it's not. So these two aspects are bad. Hers is bad, obviously, but this encourages the studies there, and ours, because it hinders our study. Because we cannot convince this, even though there is a student of mine who is the Secretary of Environment, also Judith is a student. It's difficult to convince the City Hall there in Natal, and I am from Natal, that it is important to monitor air. So we can really disclose data that say, oh, that is the purest air in the Americas, but with data. So let's encourage tourism as we have. But if we do not have this information, systematic information, what we have, and something that I not presented because it's a work from our, we have many cases of respiratory diseases in Natal, especially in the neighborhoods where growth is more intense. Maybe the aspect is not pollution generated by vehicles, but the use of land, use and occupation of land. So we needed to develop studies that will characterize this particulated material and the pollutants to identify where the problem comes from. So here some data. Every week we have this blog spot to show the variation. Interesting, because maximum data at some points are getting closer from the limits that we have for the norm. So, okay, it's okay, the quality is great, but at some point we may need some, or we may have some information that will receive more attention. here for 2.5. Parallel to it, our experiment, real-world experiment, has the social focus. So we started using a form. This diagnosis of the respiratory health of the population there. So these data that I am showing, they are all preliminary data. So we have some information such as it's the purest air in the Americas, but preliminary data show that biggest part of population do suffer from any of these discomfort, or respiratory disease or discomfort identified during our survey. And frequently, there is also
apresentam sintomas respiratórios,
some respiratory systems associated to air pollution. This questionnaire, this survey, was based on the same survey that the Ministry of Health applies in a program that is Vigiar. We had some adaptations. We expanded the survey because the focus of Vigiar is on that patient who is there in the hospital, but we expanded to try to understand the causes where maybe the causes would be from. I'm not showing all the results because we are treating the surveys yet. Another thing is also that Professor Leila presented her the protection there, the box for the sensor, like a shelter. So we thought about developing one too. These are basic things that we have to do. My student developed the prototype for it. And then we aggregate other aspects to it. For example, for the researching group I belong to, which is for basic sanitation, we also develop recycling projects. We have the project Reciclamar that collects plastic waste from the coast. So we developed prototypes and they developed, I brought it here for you to see. The box, like a shelter with all the identification of the project using this recycled material. So it's another additional factor and people were so excited about it and they say, if you need this shelter, we can do so. If INCT, if you are interested in having this shelter, there is the possibility of preparing this for you as well, okay? So here the group, the professor from Reciclamar who helped us, Professora Sheila Varela, the coordinators here, and I would like to give special thanks for the ones who made it possible for us, for me as a civil engineer, and amidst all these meteorologists and physicians and physicists, sorry, I had to learn about the air quality and the monitoring with the sensors, all the technical part that we have to develop all together. And then Professor Leila, thank you very much. Professor Tarciana, my colleague, Professor Edson, from the Federal University from the campus of Toledo, Professor Wilson, also the biggest coordinator of the experiment with sensors. And our dear professors, Rita, who is also critical for the discussion. She she made questions that allowed us to adapt our systems. And I know that I forget some of other colleagues who cooperated. Sorry for that, but I would like at this point, at this phase, we are only here able to present it because these colleagues cooperated with us, such as Professor Kleber, who works with safety, work safety engineering, also a work about air quality that we want to expand and bring to Kleber to it, and our colleague, technician, now a master, Ricardo França, who is the guy from electronics. So he helps us when equipment are not working well. He is the one that is going to provide us this support so we can continue and collect more data. So thank you for this opportunity.
Então, agora
Thank you,
temos a
Jean.
próxima
Now
apresentação.
we are going to have our next
Professor
presentation.
Wilson Cabral.
Professor Wilson Cabral, you can take the stage, please.
Bom dia a todos e todas.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I would like to have been with you since Monday or Tuesday, but I had some campaign things to do. For the ones who do not know, I was candidate.
Eu me inseri num contexto meio
I put myself in a different context. I was a candidate mayor, and they say that was almost there, you know, but it was not like that. I was far from being elected, but I learned a lot from it. I have some experiences to tell you about. We can talk about that later. I think it's interesting, and I would like to comment about the network, the Climapolis network, to the complementary character we have. So we have three presentations here, and I think each of us presented and are going to present a very complementary context, which is interesting because we use the knowledge that is being created and developed by some and others, and we can replicate it. And the idea is that in the final context, all this will make sense because this is what we want to do from now. So just to give you a context on climate change, which is the focal topic of the event, this graph here is already outdated. This image is outdated, and we have been insisting on it, but now the events are showing themselves, even before we predicted them to happen. So the predictions we had for 2040, the last 30 years of the century, even though exactly this thing that we are seeing here of a lot of heat, increasing temperature, low precipitations in great part of the country, rain concentrated in the south region. This is exactly what we are seeing with extreme events. And in the case of air quality, all this has an impact because it is the sum of factors such as higher temperatures, less precipitation, during droughts contribute to clean the air, let's say. Forest fires, we have lived all this year very intensively, and this also intensifies the problem of air pollution. And we lose this air quality. So we need to measure, understand, analyze, and of course, take action around that. Jean said very well, in Natal is not in the map, but it's not only Natal. In São José dos Campos, where we live, a city that is famous for its technology, and we have two CETESB stations located in points that do not capture the whole thing when it comes to air quality, and we make decisions based on them. So more recently, we have the possibility to install the biggest thermoelectric in Latin America, in Caçapava, for natural gas, very close to São José dos Campos, in a place that, if you consider the parameters, saturated air for at least 3 pollutants that we normally monitor. And nothing seems to avoid this mega project to be installed there and launching even more other pollutant gases to our air and transforming that area in a the barrel about to explode, and also contributing to with more emissions, greenhouse effect gases, and making the scenario even worse. So we really need, so if we have a challenge, which is low resources to invest and maintain these reference stations, each station costs around 500,000, $1.5 million. So its maintenance is also very expensive. So the network that should have expanded to countryside didn't, because we have the same network used to have 10 years ago. And we need also that the municipalities face the game, face the challenge, and start acting in that sense. Our standards, our quality standards, national levels, state levels, are stopped. Recently, we had a change from at CETESB, but these standards were changed according to what WHO predicted in 2005. So we were outdated there, and now WHO has new recommendations, and we are again more than a decade behind when it comes to standards. So these are the challenges, and in order to face these, at least the two first ones, the low-cost sensors network can be a response. It's not the answer, not the only answer or the response, but it can be an interesting one. The prior attempts we had, so what did we do? This group and other groups in Brazil, other experimental groups, started making a survey of references around the world of these initiatives worldwide, a selection of low-cost sensors. So there is a range of them in the market, but which ones will be more like benefit cost with more robust information that can be used in our networks? And also, not only benefit cost, but also effectiveness cost. A second round, let's say, started developing these integration platforms, but based on development kits such as Arduino, Raspberry Pi, and other development kits, and some trials with the acquisition of more complete equipment. There are two examples here. The guys from Jean working in a context, and Leila's group working with another, like a trial of a station that can be replicated, more complete, more comprehensive one. I don't know, Leila, but I think that from Raspberry Pi and Arduino is already, a place that was developed, a circuit developed especially for it. But what is the challenge we have had with these projects? Because these are projects that are discontinued. So we have the resources, create a team, work on a project for a year or two, and the project is discontinued. There is no continuity, and this generates an interruption, and big part of course, we have the learnings, but something is lost because there is no continuity. So this limits our scope. So if we want low sensor network, the idea is for it to expand, that there is no 10 or 20 sensors. We want thousands of them. And in order to do that, we needed to be more robust. We need more robust projects. And then a solution that we are proposing, it's a little bit different from what you have seen so far, which is to create a collaboration involving what we call the quintuple helix, that started from the triple helix, which is university, private company, government, but adding society and sustainability to the context. And with a focus on this case, focusing on the middleware. This part, not the sensor itself, not the final, the end user, or data accuracy. So trying focusing on the middleware, which is the platform, developing circuit that is more optimized, that would support other kinds of transmission. And in this case, it's a partnership, Climapolis, ITA, and Texas, which is a private company, technology startup located in Technological Park in São José dos Campos, a company from a PhD research and development project there. So how far have we been? I'm calling the first tier there, like we the idea, né? Let's take a sensor. It's a small project, so let's take a low-cost sensor to measure the particulated matter in 2.5. This sensor worked with the infrared detection, with no forced ventilation, low accuracy, and, of course, very low cost. So we developed a device in order to be like a shelter for this sensor, which I call first tier. This gave birth or generated knowledge so we could move to a second tier. And then we started, let's see, Leila, what have you worked with, sensors, what is nice, what is the best, you know, cost benefit with good accuracy, that we can then increase it with machine learning or fuzzy. And then we got to this PMS 3003 from Plantower, which today is in most of the companies that do this kind of private monitoring. So this was the Plantower. This has detection by laser, forced ventilation, medium accuracy, and then we can even improve it using some algorithms. It is a low-cost sensor, and what we did was to develop a platform also between what would be an extremely optimized platform and the development kits. So we still use ESP32, that it is a development kit, but focused on Wi-Fi, because we wanted to work with Wi-Fi, incorporated this ESP32, and created a more optimized, more robust platform for them. This is the prototype. You will be able to see it. I will allow you to see it. And what is interesting is that this prototype, its plate and everything, was developed for like a better development kit made by FATEC together with Texas and the Technological Park. So it's also related to other research projects generated this prototype, and it is at the point of being spread. You know, we are going to scale this device up. So here you have the Plantower device. I am going to show some details about it, and after I will let you see it closer, okay? And there in the second tier, we started experimenting sensors that offer a little bit better accuracy. Plantower itself created another sensor with detection by laser, forced ventilation, but there is a, you know, like a flow, there is a channel. Let me see what it is. I have only 15 minutes to conclude my presentation. So this detail in black that you see there on the corners, this is the fan with a forced ventilation, and also for the allow the air to live. So it improves the accuracy internally. And with that, you have a better possibility to it. And it was also for an adaptation for this sensor. And the third tier, we are working on it now, working with the sensor, but with a platform that will allow me, which is like multi-transmission. So I can use LoRa, Sigfox, and BIoT, with the IoT of the telecommunication companies, from the mobile operators. That is the cheapest nowadays, let's say. And all this customized, and the idea, this was developed together with Texas, and Texas participation in this context is the idea that we have a device, let's say, intermediary one, we can use this in our real world experiments. We can distribute somehow it to schools and work with the citizen awareness, like a pilot experiment, and all this very cheaply made. And then a more advanced device, let's say, that would be like Clarity or other companies who are there creating these networks, low-cost networks, but with all the integration. So it's a product that can be adequate by the government, state, city halls, or even by private companies which need this solution for the air quality. So this would be like a bonus that they would have to continue develop these and ensure that this platform has parcel of it acting no cost, let's say, to meet this demand of the citizenship, and another one that will keep all this, and it would be this more advanced one. The idea is to have this multi-platform, and I can take this sensor, for example, take it somewhere a little bit further with no Wi-Fi coverage, so I can use LoRa. If there is no LoRa, Firefox, so Firefox, LoRa, they have very good coverage in national territory, and I will, so it will be easier to install it anywhere, let's say. So the next steps in this context would be the calibration of sensors. Leila has made a lot of advance on this. We want to learn from them. So we have a partnership together with INPE because they have calibrated sensors, standardized ones. The acquisition of sensors, of these sensors that we select in order to increase our scale. Installation of disposals in São José dos Campos for this real-world experiment, data analysis and validation, replication in Natal together with Jean and Judith, and the next round that validating the platform, we can start dealing with other sensors, ozone, NOx, and others. And what have we learned so far? This is important. With this partnership with the private sector, we want to ensure the longevity of our project. This is important, and this is something we decided for, and we are sharing with you. We need to have this appeal. Private sector is not going to participate if they do not have a return themselves. And this set of tier 2 and 3 can maybe help us to establish this partnership. So here you have the QR code that will lead you to the website, that will take you to the website. It's a website from ITA. You have all the links to the works, and we are creating, and I'm just waiting a little bit more interaction with Climápolis platform so we can upload this data to the platform. Okay, so thank you, Leonardo, and your team, Igor, and your team for the development of this platform. That's it. I'm available for questions. Thank you. Just a comment. I told you that I was going to show you that we had that prototype that tries to mimic that first channel of the sensor, which is the most expensive for Plantal. Maybe we are going to have a low-cost solution for it. So it is there. You can see it later, okay, when I handle you that. So with that, we close the presentations, and now we invite all the lecturers to take their seat here to start our debate. So please, Professor Jean, Professor Leila, Wilson.
Então foi muito bom que na sessão anterior.
It was very nice because in the previous session I had the opportunity to see, Judith as the leader of the debate. I didn't know what I should do. So, and I ended up learning. And we have 30 minutes for questions about a topic which is extremely important and show how brave these Brazilian researchers are, you know, to enter, to start approaching with lots of problems with financial issues, calibration, equipment that are not there in the cities where they live. So we have to take equipment to cities that are close to them or different states sometimes in order to be able and do something and collect information about air quality, meteorology. So it shows how brave we are. And unfortunately, in terms of scientific publications, people were not very, there is not much empathy when it comes to it. So we really suffer about it. So by seeing this presentation, I think I'm more motivated now for it. So congratulations for following, so for having this initiative of collecting environmental data in Brazil. Okay, so we advanced a lot from the first moment. These are the prototype. Today we know some of the platforms that are official, commercial ones, people who publish Purple Art, other initiatives we have, and they are actually diffused, but I believe that at some point we will need to do this exercise and transform it into an initiative from Brazil, Brazil's initiative. Somehow we are going to gather efforts and do this. So I will open now for questions from the audience.
Thank you very much for your very interesting presentation that shows how much progress is made by using those new sensors. What is very interesting also is the opportunity to create connections between the academic world and the private sector, which you have highlighted. This is not without difficulty sometimes. I mean, the objectives of the academic community are different very often than the objective of the private sector. And the private sector usually needs to develop a product that can be commercialized and brings money to them, which is not an issue for the academic community so much. So in terms of those inexpensive devices, low-cost devices, how do you see the private sector, not so much the one that built the devices, but to exploit the devices, how do they make really money on this, and why do they do that?
In English, in português? Bom, vou ficar em português, vai ser mais fácil
I will
responder para
speak
você.
in Portuguese because then it will be easier to answer your question. But this solution that we have been working with, of having two different formats, let's say, was the way we found to associate one thing to the other. The interest, commercial interest, and scientific interest. And it's not unbuilding the idea of working with citizenship science, so allowing that, citizen monitoring from different bases being done by the society take place. So in the second option that I showed you, data and the property of data is totally from the community, the ones that are going to place that station in a school or... So what the company is going to do is to make a platform available so they can see it, perennial. So if they want, this data can also be allocated at Climapolis platform or any other platform. The other arrangement, let's say, which is for a more optimized device that will meet the demands, customized demands of companies from the state, this has the commercial aspect. And for that, the company is going to develop the platform and sell the services of the platform. And this is how they are going to obtain their gain. The business model is not defined yet. It can be with a sale of the platforms, as some of these companies who are working with a global level are doing, and maintenance costs of the platform, the online platform, or we have checked some of the emission. There is the possibility of, for example, not only the government who need this information on air quality, there are many other private sectors who also demand for this information. And then you would be able to maybe buy large scale these platforms and maybe donate them to the users. I will mention one example. The monitoring for companies like or sanitation or electricity companies, for example. These are companies who have in their users people, families, they have the utility bills with this company. If the information is interesting for them, they can buy it and then they can donate the devices to be installed in the house of each citizen to expand it. And then the information generated by all these devices for them, there is a higher price than the price they simply paid for the device themselves, you know? So there are different business models to be explored. And the fact that we are discussing this together with the academy is about asking if it works well. This works, this doesn't work. So how far can we go? This is still open. This is being discussed. So we can gain with that and you can also gain with that. That is the point, I think. I don't know if it was clear. I don't know if I answered your question. Hello, everyone. I think that Leila talked about, Wilson also talked about the next steps, which is about uncertainties. From all the meetings I participated, civil defense, environmental entities, the city hall, there is a skepticism on this. I don't know if you faced this because you are more there at the edge of the discussion. Skepticism when it comes to uncertainties of low-cost sensors. And then maybe the question I will ask you is how to reduce this level of uncertainty and still keep low cost, and how to convince these parties, these entities, that it is worth having more low cost sensors, even though the cost is a little bit higher than investing a lot of money in sensors that have maybe lower accuracy, but the cost benefit is not so high. So it's more about this discussion, okay? Thank you. That is something which is fundamental, crucial point, because when you decrease cost, you lose on the other end. But what I see as a differential, it is to convince on the possibility to have a lot of these sensors. And when you have a lot of them, we see that if we have a station, a reference station, for example, here, there are some situations in São Paulo that are relatively close to the stations, but they are measuring the same values because it's the variability of these concentrations. And then when we see the sensors and we are able to use them, there is a bigger amount of them. And of course, together, which I think this must be the approach, we cannot say now, let's just use low cost sensors, but together with the reference ones, some of them being able to work with them all together. So this way, in my opinion, it's how we can convince them. And we have seen this, that the sensors itself, there is a big field for research. They are being improved, And even then, we are trying to keep this low cost. We also gave an example. Of course, the cost increased a little bit, but if we see something from 20 when I started, now we have for the same price much better sensors. So this field also, in addition to the variables that are increasing the number of variables, that we can have these measurements. So this is what we have to work. And of course, we need these stations like air quality reference stations, so we can do a little bit of these comparisons. Place them so they can serve as a reference. Another important point is that low cost, everything is equipment. All of them will need it, even more people that are qualified to calibrate these with the gas, to check it. So the cost, maintenance cost is heavy. So maybe this balance, I know it's difficult to have it, but that would be favorable to us. When it comes to the question, just to complement, we try to see some initiatives, this partnership with the private sector. They supported us with some reference equipment, but when they could do something commercial, like taking the prototype MVP and send it to the commercial, they see sometimes there is an investment, the market, there is in the market a range of commercial equipment ready to be used. So I think it's valid, but there is this difficulty, let's say. I think this is what they commented. In this second prototype we had, then it is in the context of a company created with partners, so then VP can be commercially explored. But then we need a differential, something that has more economical benefit, otherwise it is not going to be in the market. And just to help answer this question, I think we have to see what the role is, the role of low-cost sensors in this context. They are not going to give you the accuracy you need, so you need the two models. But just to exemplify, I didn't include in my presentation, I finished my presentation yesterday, midnight, and the student who had the graphs couldn't show me it, couldn't send me this on time. But you know the forest fires in São Paulo 1 month and a half ago? And then the stations were collecting data at this time. And then it counted the variation, so it doubled the particulated matter during the day it was measuring, and we checked on data source, there was a peak of people in hospital 3 days later. So this is the kind of information that can be anticipated by a low-cost network of sensors. For example, what happened with these people in hospital, if we had a period, for example, counting dengue or COVID, in parallel, we would have had, a full capacity of hospitals being used and many people could die. So it's the minimum of anticipation to maybe manage chaotic situations. So these are very important information that we can have from these sensors that can be explored. And we can think about the uses we can make of it. And I would like also to complement it. I think that we are going to have maybe all these initiatives. We are going to be able to, in the case, a label for each of these data. So the quality of this data is good or bad. The calibration level, we have to send this information to people. And these guidelines are being produced. There are some initiatives in the US, and and we are going to do what we have always done, to copy what they did there. So these reference stations, we know with the analysis of data and talking with Vanessa, this is everybody's impression. They are hyper vulnerable. There are drifts, failure, no measurements, these abrupt changes we cannot explain, especially because of the lack of maintenance that maybe they cannot operate. So it's general rule, and we need specific labels for each of these stations. That will be useful to increase density. Every initiative is going to be valid in that sense. Sorry to interrupt the debate. Good morning, once again, Daniela, coordinator of land use in the city of São Paulo. I see this, I have very good impression, these partnerships, public, private, especially when it comes to having more time for the projects and their implementation and the continuity of the actions, the public actions. I understand that some companies are interested, they have a goal of having a more sustainable response or because of the products they sell. So they are interested in hiring companies who promote this sensors network for themselves and then in the region around them. But this data will be only for these companies, and we need data to be disclosed and monitored for the whole city. But on the other side, public sector very often cannot keep a technical team with the qualifications to monitor this data, qualitative data, and also in charge of maintaining the stations. I don't know if there is or there are companies that would have this capacity of installing multiple sensors, replacing it if necessary, mapping, treating data, and deliver it to the city hall so data can be disclosed in their platform. That would be the city of São Paulo. When it comes to air quality and water, I don't have this data, but we are really incipient in the beginning of this monitoring, trying to monitor noise. Using sensors around the city, we do not have them, so this is about to happen, but this was a requisite, it is required by law. But when it comes to air quality, water quality, I understand it could be that there would be this possibility. So my question is if it would be a possibility, if there is a company that would be able to do it, having seen that we do not have this capacity to hire such service as so far. I think there is no.
Respondendo, acho que não existe essa.
Answering this question, I think there is no. We have to define what you name as capacity. So having the capacities to meet like a public notice or something, maybe it's possible, but there is no company that will say, look, I have a network or I want to implement a network with 10,000 low-cost sensors, and I want a company to do it, to do the maintenance. There is no such company in the Brazilian market, but I think it's possible. Because of these things you mentioned, now it's law. There is a law that determines for that. So it will certainly mobilize the market, and soon we will have this capacity. But the closer it is of a cooperation agreement with the government, so the data are available, public available, this will depend on how it is done, how. In this case, specifically, the company we are talking about is a company that is from the academy, so it has this development, but it's not every company that has this profile. But if there is, I think it's a two-way. Eventually, this company, there must be like an exchange of data. State wants the data, they would have the conditions of make it public, or doing any kind of exchange, I would say.
Querem complementar?
Would you like to complement the answer?
Complementando aqui, acho que
just to complement, I think I would make it at another time, but when you have too many options, maybe when it comes to low-cost sensors, it can be less relevant. But we are talking about the best world. The Brazilian reality is completely different from it. There is nothing, there is no monitoring. So the sensors,
já que os municípios não teriam condições de ter
the
as estações.
municipalities wouldn't be able to have it here. So just to complement this, which is really relevant, but we told in the previous table about normatization and different realities that we need to consider for these norms and standards. Maybe even qualifying the sensors as low, medium, or bad quality. Maybe it is not so relevant, so impactful right now. I think what we need now is to have the sensors as an indicator, such as the obvious example given by that was presented by the professor. Maybe the focus of bringing the private sector will be on the core, because we talked about it during our works there. It's incipient. I haven't talked to Judith yet. Maybe a company who is interested in showing that they are concerned about the environment, for example, recycling or something like this, they could become partners in the process. And then the business plan is not of selling, but showing that, look, I'm helping here, recycling plastic, and with that, we have some resources to know. Maybe the business plan is to increase the possibilities in order to have a more sustainable expansion of this network. Any other question?
A última pergunta aqui da Judith.
Great question from Judith. They asked me to be standing. So I have a question for you who have worked for many years with low-cost sensors. In your point of view, do you think that mid, long term, these low-cost sensors can replace the standard tools that are certified for the monitoring networks in Brazil, having seen that there are states that do not have the money to invest in this equipment? They could only maybe buy a few sensors or in order to monitor all the rest of the city, are the places in the city who do not have these standard networks. They could use low-cost sensors, but maybe more reliable ones? For the ones who cannot afford the stations, she means, having more sense. I'm not going to say that they can replace these stations, but it will be a combination having this low-cost network together with the reference ones. I think that is the trend. The more we wanted to know, to have better data and then bring this information for the population, this is more thinking about like smart cities, something that is being discussed, many platforms, many developments and initiatives in different cities. In Londrina, for example, is one with indicators, and then you see when it comes to air quality, it can be measured if the city is smarter or not, and then also related to services, not only for air quality, but to other ends. So when it comes to air quality, I think that we do not see this mid long term, the resource in order to have more reference stations. So there some reference stations would be necessary and then complemented with the low cost ones. That's my opinion. I agree with Leila, and I will give you an example of it. CETESB here uses the automatic substations for normative, for regulation purposes. So the low-cost sensor networks will reach this level to be used to that end. So you need the reference stations. So Brazil, I think the environmental quality from the Ministry of the Environment, they are doing some adjustments with the public ministry, and in the capitals, they will all have their stations. So there is something that they are doing because it's necessary, and they are complementary. The objectives are complementary. In this line, I think these are complementary And the focus maybe of these low-cost sensors can be better defined in this environment now. Why do we need to expand this low-cost network now with this focus of replacing the standard measurements? No, I don't think this is so. I think our focus is when it comes to citizenship science, air quality as an important topic. And once again, I say that we are here among the best of the world in terms of knowledge, but the reality is that I always bring a personal example. I am from hydrological resources, and why am I working with air quality? Because there are people missing to work with that. So the background of these people, the background of the public that think about this issue of air quality, the low-cost centers is important in order to raise this awareness that air pollution is an important focus also for our scientific and technical discussions in the municipalities. So I think that with that, we can close our debate on low-cost sensors. Thank you for all the participants of this panel and everybody who added to this. A big round of applause. Thank you. And they allowed me to use the mic, and I have now this. I am here to start the next debate, which is the presentation on the Climapolis platform. So I ask you all to stay here in this auditorium because we are going to have the presentation about the platform. Okay, just a minute for the guys to take their seats.
Então, começando uma nova sessão.
So, starting now, the next session.
Bom, reservaram tempo específico aqui para a gente.
So we have a specific time here to talk about the platform, something that we have been developing the whole year. It was an idea that we implemented maybe in that meeting there in Natal, where we wanted to find something that was common to all the researchers involved in the initiative, and that would add value to all of us, to everywhere. So for all the researchers that were involved in the process, and it will also add information for anyone who would like to conduct real-world experiments. So we had the idea to create this web platform and make it available, make information available on the topics related to Climapolis that are diverse, many. So we can talk about diversity, climate change, air pollution, urban drainage. All these topics are topics that would permeate this institute. And we wanted then a hypervisual tool and would add value to what we are doing. But when we started, whenever we think about developing something, we think about a question we want to answer. So what the question that we want to answer is? With this tool. So I will hand it over now. I will tell you some of the questions we had during this process. The presentation is going to be comprised of an introduction. It will be hybrid. I will make the introduction, and Igor is going to hand over from the second topic. He was the one who developed the website, so he is going to continue after the introduction. So starting the introduction of it, the question that guided the development of this platform. So the first is, what is the scientific maturity in the national territory when we talk about climate change and associated topics? What is the scientific maturity of it? There seem some hyper-developed places, hypertrophy in some places, and others simply total nothing, let's say. So this is what we wanted to check. This was one of the questions, okay? But how is it distributed? What research has been conducted on climate change in the Brazilian territory? So how is the research distributed in the country? Which is the idea of the institute. Another question, maybe this research are appropriate with the areas with the higher risks? Do these studies align with the areas of greatest climate risk? We don't know. We didn't know this either. Until the point we started collecting data for the platform and we could build it. And then we realized that perhaps this was a gap. Seeing the other existing platforms, other initiatives of other institutes, the National Institute of Technology, this was a gap. So to report this, what is the concentration of studies related to climate change in Brazil and the territory distributed in the space? So what are the places with the most scientists, for example, who study climate change? Very likely to be São Paulo, but what are the others? Are there many people studying the Amazon or foreigners who study there? So many things that we would like to map, and we wanted to bring it, to put it in a tool so people could see it. So the idea is to make studies on climate change, adaptation, and sustainable development in Brazil more accessible. This is the idea of the platform, and I invite you all to access. Of course, if you want, nobody has to do anything, but if you want, you can access the QR code and navigate our platform. So this is the official moment for us to present Climapolis platform to everyone. So from now on, Igor will lead now, and thank you, Professor Tassiana, who invited me to take part in the Institute Judite, Professor Maria de Fátima, who welcomed me also. So it is a great honor to take part in this project. I forgot Rita, Rita, the queen of cuteness. Okay.
Bem, pessoal, bom dia.
Well, guys, good morning, good afternoon. It's after midday already. My name is Igor. As the professor introduced me, before starting, I will take the opportunity to invite and to thank Professor to participate in this project with him. And I hope you could scan the QR code. I also noticed that when you were going to open the website, the first thing you will see is blur and then a communicate. We asked if you accept if you understand how we use the platform. We are not having any personal information from you. The objective is trying to understand how the dynamics of the platform work for you. The things you access the most, the things you access the least, to understand about the experience of the user, and also to improve our characters. My interface is going to be a little different from yours, but the resources are all there, they are all the same. I will Now, I will start now navigating. So platform, INCT, Climapolis, dot. So with now I will access the QR code. I will put it presentation mode now. And while it's loading, probably the interface you use, there is a bar where you have the menus within the buttons. If you click out of it, you will have the access to the map. I will accept cookies. And in case you are bilingual, you can change the language using the button there on the right corner. You can click on it and you can automatically change it to a different language. And you can also change the top, something just static. You can see if the dark or white, okay? So the first thing that calls our attention is this map of Brazil with different red shades. If you are from Brazil, you see that we divided it per state. We can change it soon. I'm going to explain this, and these different shades of red explain or show us the difference between the amount of publications per topic in the territory divided per state. We have an idea here of the number of publications. It's on the left for you if you are on your mobile phone. And if we scroll our mouse, we can see the number of publications related to the topic. We are going to go into detail how it was obtained. But before, I wanted to talk a little bit more about this field on the left, which you can see. The first part is the section that divides our country. We can choose from regions. When we click per region, Brazil is divided per regions, and these are grouped into regions. This can be useful for some of the managers that are interested in an investment more focused in a specific region, for example. We can see it divided per state or municipality. And this is really interesting because you can see there are some differences, big differences, when we start looking for more specific topics like air pollution, climate change, and so on. If I click in any of these places, for example, here in Rio Grande do Sul, you zoom it, and at the same time, the graph there on the right is updated. This graph talks about the amount of publications that were done with time in the selected topics. And which topics are that? Let's take one step behind and the states. And this is air pollution, which has to do with the macro topic we are working not today and tomorrow. So we can see here that the dynamics change, the amount of studies change, and it's very clear that the development of case studies is much bigger for the state of São Paulo, different from other regions. I'm going to exclude here agriculture and add any others, such as natural disasters, climate change. We see that the difference is not so big, but it doesn't change much the distribution of the studies. The biggest part is in the region of the São Paulo. So I'm going to enter here in São Paulo, and the graph once again is more focused in São Paulo. You see the distribution of studies for the whole state. Air pollution is here, climate change is here when I scroll the mouse, and natural disasters. If you want to see what these case studies were, you click on search publications, and then a screen will open with a list that is automatically fed with all these studies that were classified from the most recent to the least recent. And in case you wanted to see a publication here, you can use this search field. For example, Andrade,
Em homenagem à nossa excelentíssima professora Maria de Fátima.
to play homage to our professor, Maria de Fátima.
Os papers que têm
And
participação
all the papers that have the participation of the professor, an abstract or the paper, will be listed
para a
here
nossa apreciação.
for our appreciation. Some of these studies, we could also find an abstract for dynamic reading if you're interested for a specific topic. So if you click here, you can have the abstract, real time, the full abstract of the publication, for you to make sure this is what you're looking for. And in case they are interested, they can click, and through DOI, they are directed for the full paper, or that, as it is the case here, you can see.
Eu vou voltar aqui, então.
Now, going back there.
Eu tenho certeza que a gente fez trabalho bastante
I'm
extenso.
sure we had an extensive work on it, but it is very likely for people not to be, maybe some publications are not included here for any reasons. This is why we created a button here, contribute. If you are interested in contributing with your own works that are not here, or other authors, you can click the button. We will receive this notification that somebody suggested a publication to be included. We are going to analyze this. Even the lattice of the person will be inserted in our database. We are going to see if there are other possibilities, any other data that is not contemplated here and would be interesting to have. So today we are working with a very simple form, a Google form, in order to have the first selection, and we can make progress with this. We can integrate this form better in the platform.
Como a gente está numa mesa de cientistas, acredito que tem muita gente.
As we have here many scientists, everybody here is very analytical. You see that I haven't talked about these last items here.
A gente tem aqui,
we have here a session called type of data. Instead of the visualization, in addition to the view divided for state or topic, we have this filter for types of data. In this first launch, we have a big volume of papers, more than 10,000 semi-automatically selected by lattice, and the scope for this network of Climapolis and associated researchers.
E a gente fez uma classificação usando inteligência artificial por
and
temas.
we did this classification using artificial intelligence per topics, and then we had a workforce using an algorithm to classify case studies per place. It is very difficult to do that. I'm not going into detail because it's not relevant, but we have an interesting product that can be used for public management and for search, academic search. Soon, we are going to have, actually, there is the possibility of adding database, real-world experiment, and books to be contemplated the same way we do with the papers. If you are interested, for example, of interesting database that was contemplated by any scientist on climate change, you can click here, the database, and the data will be uploaded.
Por exemplo, bases de dados, só de selecionar artigos.
So you can select all the papers there, and as we have known, there is no information, we have an empty map, but it's going to change soon because next month this information is going to be included. I would like to talk also about the perspective we have with this platform. We see this platform as a way to help both managers, researchers, public sector, but also a way to scale up, because many people talking about data. We could easily, using this structure, we change some parts to add measurement data to include it in a very, to put it all in the platform. It would be a collective work. There would be other initiatives that we need to do, but it is a possibility. I see a way for us to INCT consolidate as a reference when it comes to information about climate change in Brazil, so far, at least in Brazil.
É isso, eu espero que vocês
That's
apreciem.
it. I hope you enjoy it. If you have any suggestions, feedback, they are very welcome. As it is the first launch, we need feedback to know which direction to take. So thank you very much. Thank you, Professor. I will invite him to close the session.
Obrigado, Igor. Bom, vocês experimentaram pouco, né?
Thank you, Igor. You have tried the platform, all the effort we have made to make it possible, but the idea is to plant the seed to maybe have a platform that will harmonize information. We have a place to receive information from researchers, a database for the initiative that was locally made by Professor Jean there in Natal. So where I'm going to place all this information, not to get lost, you know, like the paper, everything, information that was not enough to write a paper, but you can include on the platform. And we are going to put all this information together, and maybe we can start having this robustness that we need. So there is a space now to have this cooperation, for us to build this all together. I think it's common for everyone. It's a serious issue to be addressed, which is to look after our country. That's the idea. Thank you very much. Thank you for everybody, especially Igor, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for your attention.
A Judite pediu para eu fazer uma coisa e eu acabei esquecendo.
Judite asked me to do something. I was emotionally involved with the platform, but INCT has launched an official webpage. Igor can show the address here and navigate a little bit with you. Okay?
Que bom que a gente conseguiu terminar
I was checking the time. It's good that we finished a little bit before, because this is the mobile interface. If you click out of it, you have the access to the map.
Vamos entrar então no site do INCT Climapolis.
Let's enter now the website of INCT, climapolis.org.
É bastante simples, inctclimapolis.org.
inctclimapolis.org. And as soon as we access the website, we have to wait for it to load.
Essa interface que também já está adaptada para
You also have this interface, which is adapted for smartphones. This website was recently created, was recently built. If you speak other languages, we also have the translation there in the right bottom. And the website, is like the interface of INCT, what it really is. How do we present ourselves to society? We have an institute that talks a little bit more about us, our history, the structure that was presented by Professor Judite yesterday, and the goals that we now have. We also have here my network, the detail about the members, the people who participate here, people who are interested. We are here, open arms, to welcome all the institutions who collaborate with us, details about the management committee, and also about the international cooperation committee. We also included here a highlight for the real world experiments, which is the focus of INCT, and here a brief description of what the real world experiments are, how they are conducted. These pages are being updated. So another session, we create content, we put there, another session for scientific publications. Here we have an introduction, papers, theses, dissertations, reports that were done exclusively by the members, INCT members, also under construction. Another session for educational content, because the Institute is not only formed by research, we also have an extension here. I believe it's important to make it available in our website. I think you found a study that would contemplate what you're looking for.
Mas caso vocês encontrem nesses
In
estudos
case there
aqui,
is
a gente
this
tem
study, I
algumas
want
dicas
to,
do sistema polis,
we have
sobre
some
solicitar a gente também, que vocês utilizam.
credits policy here.
E a
It's
gente também tem
important
uma
to
sessão
check
que se chama
this.
para acordos de
And
cooperação
also a
técnica.
session for
São
cooperation,
acordos,
technical cooperation
feitos pela
agreements,
prefeitura, se eu não tenho enganado,
agreements
em outras
made by
instituições.
city halls, other
Vou dar um
institutions.
destaquezinho maior aqui
And
para
finally,
notícias,
another
que é um
highlight
canal
for
onde
the
a gente vai
news. This
detalhar
is the
as
channel we
notícias
have
principais
to
do Instagram,
detail
um local onde a
our
gente consegue explorar um
on
pouco
Instagram
da
is
verdade para saber
also
o que
a
está acontecendo
network
no
that we can
contexto
use. We are a little bit more free to write what is
Então, aqui
going
vocês vão
on
ter, vocês
INCT.
têm
So
disponível
here
as
you
notícias,
see
os conteúdos
all
que
the
a gente
news
produziu,
available, all the
inclusive nas nossas redes
content that
sociais.
was generated in our social medias.
E por fim, uma sessão de
And finally,
que a comunidade entre em contato conosco, que a gente consiga
here
falar com
our
as pessoas
contact section,
o
so the
mais rápido
community
possível.
can access us and we can reply to them as soon as possible. So here you can have all our contacts too.
Pessoal, caso
Okay?
alguém tenha alguma dúvida,
In case you have any doubts, we have some minutes. I believe we can open for questions. If you have questions related to the platform or our next steps.
Fantástico. Meus parabéns, principalmente pela
Fantastic. Congratulations on the platform. It is complicated to put all this information together and show the information in a way people can really go there and check and access it easily.
Meus parabéns mesmo.
These congratulations on that. A suggestion I have, if you could please access the platform, terminology is important. And there in the filter you have natural disasters. It's not, there is no natural disaster. You put extreme events, okay? Because disasters are not natural. This is something important I would suggest for you to change. It's only this, you know, apart from it, everything else is perfect. It's very good to have this platform, this availability for its use, okay? This collective use of it, let's say, for anyone. But I think the terminology is important for the INCT itself. Any reference to natural disasters must be changed. Thank you.
Professora Maria, eu ia falar uma coisa sobre, antes dela falar.
I was going to say something before. These topics can be altered, we can include others, and the idea is that soon we are going to install artificial intelligence to, you know, all the time this focus, and they will automatically do this. So the platform itself is going to retrofit. But this is some development that has to be predicted. I don't know how the Institute intends to do that, but this can be done. We have this implemented, we have all the information flow implemented, but we still have some structural problems. We had to use a server that is not going to be available, constantly available for us. So we use a language learning model to classify it per topic, but there is a dedicated video plate, a high performance one, in order to make it work. So we had to use some resources that we won't have frequent access, but we have to try to keep its classification if it's going semi-automatically, because the code is ready. We just need a structure to run this. These are things that can happen only once a month, but we need to align some details when it comes to structure, okay? The flow is built. It has to be improved, of course, especially classifications per place, because they are really difficult to be. First, how to find the topic, then making sure that it really talks about this, if it's about the city of São Paulo, state of São Paulo, if it's another thing, we could expand it to basins. There is a set of improvements that can be made in that sense.
parabéns, tá? Excelente.
Congratulations, it's
Só uma questão
excellent.
que eu acho, às vezes
But
o
just
trabalho é
something.
feito em São Paulo, aqui no
The work
estado,
is
mas ele
done
vai
here in
tratar
São
do
Paulo, in the
urbanismo.
state, but it's
E
going
aí
to
é
treat
assim,
about
é
the
uma
Amazon, for
infinidade de
example.
trabalho, né?
And then it's a series of works, né?
Então, não sei, né? A
So
produção
I don't know,
é
maybe the
exatamente.
production
E às
is
vezes
not
tem um
exactly
pesquisador também que nem é de
from
São
this area,
Paulo.
because sometimes there is
Então, acho
a
que tem uma
researcher
questão, às vezes, talvez pelo
who is not
assunto
from São
também
Paulo.
regional, não sei.
I think when it comes to the regional
Obrigado pela
topics.
pergunta, professora. E aí eu tive sorte de ser safo nesse sentido, a gente conseguiu
I was
tanto
lucky to be smarter when it comes to this, when we could solve this problem. We thought about it there in the beginning. Okay, we are going to take where the research published or where he is from or where he is, because it doesn't make sense, because sometimes he is conducting research in the Amazon. So we really need to try and understand what is the local case study. And this was difficult, but we made that. We made the classification considering where that study was. We mentioned São Paulo because there were more studies for the state of São Paulo. And if we look by municipalities, for example, we are going to see that here in the region of São Paulo, the same happens. So, of course, we can see there is a disparity, a difference, especially when we are working with the municipalities, because normally we work with bigger regions, but that's it. So I believe it is a way, but we needed to look better the technologies to make the things, to study a little bit more to improve our efficiency.
Então, a pedido da Rita, então, a
Okay,
gente...
guys, so we are going to close now. So, and we are going to resume at 2. Okay, we are back at 2 p.m. Thank you for everything. Have a nice lunch.